Well, good evening and welcome to the Council meeting. I'm Councillor Gerard Hargreaves, the Mayor. And this meeting is being held in accordance with recent government regulations on holding virtual meetings. So please bear with us if we run into some technical challenges during the meeting as we adapt to these new ways of working. So at the outset, I would ask that councillors only unmute their microphones when they're addressing the meeting. Likewise, to save bandwidth, I would ask that councillors only switch on their cameras when speaking and remember to switch them off after having spoken. If a councillor wishes to speak on a particular item and has not been called to speak, please indicate by typing the letter Q in the conversation column or by drawing my attention by speaking up. But please don't use the conversation column for any other comments, as they can be seen generally by all participants. So to assist your fellow councillors and officers and members of the public watching online, I would ask you to identify yourself, please, as you state your name before you speak. Last month marked the third anniversary of the fire of Granville Tower, where 72 of our residents tragically lost their lives. At this special time, I ask every member of the council to pay our deepest and continuing respects in the conventional manner by marking the moment with 72 seconds silence now. Thank you. At this time, I am sure that I speak for the whole council in expressing our sincerest condolences to each and every member of our Kensington and Chelsea community who has lost family members, neighbours, friends or colleagues to the coronavirus pandemic. This month also, we mark 15 years since the London bombing. 52 people were killed by the bombings that took place on the morning of the 7th of July 2005. And among those was Jonathan Downey, who was a member of the HR team here at Kensington and Chelsea Council. We remember him and all the victims of the 7/7 attacks, and I would like to extend my thoughts and the thoughts of all members of the council to those who lost loved ones on this sad day in London's history. I would also like to extend my thoughts and condolences to the family and friends of former Mayor and Councillor, Alderman Mrs. Frances Taylor, who died on the 25th of June. Frances was a councillor for Redcliffe Ward for over 30 years and served as Mayor in 1991 to 1992. She will be fondly remembered by members of the Council for her dedication to serving the borough. I now turn to the minutes of the last meeting, held on the 24th of June. These have been circulated, and I shall take these as read and sign them as a correct record, unless anyone has a point to raise.
Mr. Mayor, I have got a point to raise.
Councillor Lowry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The task of taking minutes is quite a delicate one, something which we should commend those officers for who are having to stay late for us at every meeting. So the point the Labour Group wishes to make is not a reflection on individual officers, but rather apparent changes to the structure of minute taking. We have noticed that excerpts of the motion debates have started to be bullet pointed in the minutes. The problem with this is that using bullet points brushes off the substance of the argument. At the last meeting, the Labour Group, through Councillors Press, El Naji, Nail and Atkinson, submitted amendments to all the Majority Group motions, but the crux of all these arguments is now missed. To avoid the appearance of bias, the debate should stop being selectively bullet pointed, and members of the public should be encouraged to watch the debate online. The appearance of bias is even more obvious in the minuting of the public speaking element of the last meeting. In the answers to the public, the responses of all lead members have been minuted almost verbatim, word for word, and appear even emotional and sympathetic towards the leadership team. In stark contrast, the Labour Group responses have been reduced to as little as one small sentence, even though we used up all our time. In numbers, leadership team members were allotted 968 words in the public speaking element of the minutes, and Labour members only 213 words. Going forward, the structure of the minute should be improved to avoid public perception of bias towards one particular political group. Thank you.
Councillor Lowry, I'm sorry, we're really not able to properly. Councillor Lowry, I think we've got of your point, and that will be noted and reflected in the drafting of minutes going forward. So thank you very much for that. I'm now content for me to sign a copy of the last meeting's minutes. Thank you. I shall now ask the Chief Executive to report any apologies for absence or lateness from this virtual meeting. Chief Executive. I think we have apologies from Councillor Will. Are there any other apologies?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
We have apologies for lateness from Councillor Bennett.
Thank you very much. So I shall now read out a list of all members to ascertain attendance at the meeting. Members are reminded for the meeting to be quorate, we must have at least 13 councillors present at all times. In order to manage the roll call swiftly, please just remember to switch on your microphone, answer here when your name is called, and switch off your microphone as soon as you have answered. I should go through the list in alphabetical order. Councillor Addenbrook.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Aduriam.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Ali.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Aretti.
Present, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Atkinson. Councillor Bakhtiar.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Bennett is late arrival. Councillor Beryl Cox.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Blakeman.
Adsum.
Sorry, Councillor Blakeman, I didn't get that.
It was Latin for here.
Right, thank you. Forgive my ignorance, Councillor Blakeman. Councillor Campbell.
Here, Miss.
Councillor Chowan. Councillor Chowan. Councillor Siren.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Dent Code.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor El-Nagi. Councillor El-Nagi. Councillor Evans. Councillor Evans. Councillor Folkes.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Freeman.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Hammond.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Healy,
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Henderson,
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Husband,
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Idris,
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Jackson,
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Kamali,
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Lowry,
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Lindsay,
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Marshall, Councillor Marshall, Councillor Mason,
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor McVeigh,
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Mills,
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Nile,
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor O'Connor,
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Palmer,
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Pascal,
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Press,
Here, Mr. Mayor, and Councillor Atkinson is having problems joining the meeting, so he will be a little late.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you. Councillor Rendell,
Yep, here.
Councillor Rossi,
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Round,
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Schmetterling,
Present, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, it's the
Councillor
old
Spalding,
unmuting job.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Taylor-Smith,
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Thathalides,
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Thaxter,
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Wade,
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Wason,
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Wheel,
Here.
Councillor Will, absent, apologies. Councillor Williams,
Present, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Woodger.
Here, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you
Mr.
very
Mayor.
much.
Mr. Mayor, this is Councillor Ali. I've just had a message from Councillor Al Nagi, and he's having an issue with the internet connection. He will be joining us a bit late.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
this is Councillor Charan. I had to sign out. And I've now signed back in. So I'm present too.
that's very good to have you with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Bennett here as well. Apologies.
Okay, thank you. So I think that's all councillors present have now been called.
I'm back in as well. My connection dropped. I'm sorry.
That's Councillor Evans, is that?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so I would advise all councillors that they are present in a meeting, and so they should observe the rules of behaviour set out in the Councillors' Code of Conduct. Councillors are also reminded to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest in any matter before the council this evening, and to leave the meeting before such a matter is considered. Are there any such declarations? Thank you. We now move to item 4, public questions. This evening we will be devoting up to an hour for public questions. These were invited via the council website, and I will read the questions and then ask the lead member to respond, and the spokesperson for the minority party will also be given the opportunity to respond. So question number 1 from Judith Hunt. I have been living on Latimer Road for many years. It is a lovely, quiet neighbourhood. However, the residents of Latimer Road are gravely concerned about the high-speed driving of cars, vans and motorbikes up and down Latimer Road during the daytime and nighttime on a daily basis. The road has a 20-mile-per-hour speed restriction, which is impossible to police and implement. The residents' concern cover many aspects regarding public safety for children, the elderly and family pets. All are subjected to these hazardous speeds on a daily basis. We are asking you to install the speed calming measures already existing in Oxford Gardens to cover Latimer Road from south to north of the road, as this is the only effective measure for calming the traffic speed for all our safety. If you will please implement the speed calming measures as soon as possible for Latimer Road, we would be most grateful. So who from the leadership team would like to respond to that, please?
Could I, Mr. Mayor?
Thank you. Councillor
Thanks.
Cassidy.
So first of all, a big thanks to Judith for her question. I was actually up in Latimer Road seeing the newly formed Latimer Neighbourhood Forum only a couple of weeks ago, and I saw firsthand just how tight-knit a community it is, and also that there is a problem with speeding cars, although that's something I probably already knew. That's part of why we introduced 20-mile-an-hour limits there as one of our first pilots. And whilst I certainly acknowledge that policing it is difficult, because only the police have the power to enforce against speeding offences, I am somewhat encouraged by the progress we've seen. I've got some data showing the difference that new speed limits have made on Latimer Road, and it's quite a lot. In fact, if you look at the number of cars that are speeding over, say, 30 miles an hour, that's fallen by about 50% if you take before and after. Now, there's certainly more to do, but that's good progress. Coming on to the speed calming question, I'm very happy to look at something like that. One of the big opportunities that I think ward members have at the moment is that we've all got our neighbourhood SIL pots. The deadline for spending those is the 19th of August. If you can work with your ward councillors on a bid for traffic calming or speed bumps or whatever it might be, I'm sure that would be a great way of improving residential amenity in your ward. I think now's the time. Let's go for it, and I'm happy to work with you on that.
Thank you very much. Who would like to respond from the Labour group?
Me, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to thank Ms. Judith Hunt for her good question. And I personally been campaigning for speed calming measures in my ward of St. Helens for many years. But I think the time is right now. And I appreciate Councillor Taliciti's support for this initiative. And I will promise with my fellow Councillor Portia Taxter, that we are going to work with the residents along with Councillor Johnny Talicitis and his department to try to implement these measures to make the neighborhood safer for the road and the area safe for whoever lives on that road. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bakhtiar. So we now move to question number 2 from Tim Ahern. Ahem. Is it Tim Ahem as it's printed here? But the governors of the Royal Brompton and Harefield Trust have been advised that the trust will be dissolved on the 2nd of the 1st, 20. A new trust will be formed by St Thomas's and the Brompton absorbed. The name Brompton will disappear, and within 10 years, all services will be transferred to the St Thomas's site. This will be to the detriment of our residents. Please can the council advise what steps it will take to stop this vital service being removed from Chelsea? Who is going to answer Tim Ahern's question?
Mr. Mayor, I will.
Councillor Addenbrooke, thank you.
So, Tim, thank you for raising this tonight. And I know that as a governor, you are extremely concerned about the future of the hospital. For those that don't know, the Royal Brompton was founded in 1847 and has become a world-renowned leader in research and treatment of heart and lung disease. The Brompton is also a hospital of firsts, too many to mention, and provides cradle-to-grave care. It is also one of the 3 major hospitals co-located in Chelsea, which frequently work together with multidisciplinary teams, so patients get the best treatment available at the right time. I would like to acknowledge the important role the Royal Brompton has played in treating some of the sickest patients with COVID-19 in the region, and is one of only 5 hospitals with an ECMO unit. These machines are often the last hope for patients when ventilation is no longer enough to keep a patient alive. It pumps and oxygenates blood outside of the body, allowing the heart and lungs to rest. Recently, ELSO awarded the Brompton with the prestigious Platinum Award for their ECMO programme, and they are the only commissioned centre in England to achieve it. The announcement that the Royal Brompton has entered into a memorandum of understanding for a merger with Guy's and St Thomas's on the 2nd of January 2021 without any prior consultation is extremely concerning. Many of us will remember Councillor Beryl Cox's personal account at a previous meeting that he would not be alive if it was not for the Brompton, He would not have made it if he had had to travel to Guy's and St Thomas's. So we cannot lose this valuable hospital and must do everything we can to keep it in Chelsea. I have raised the question of the future of the hospital at the recent Borough Health and Wellbeing Board, and we are awaiting a response from the North West London CCG. We have also asked both our MPs for Chelsea and Kensington to take this up with the Secretary of State, and we are now awaiting his response. And tomorrow, the chair of the Adult Social Care Select Committee is meeting with NHS England to discuss this further and make our position clear. So I'm sorry tonight I don't have any real answers for you, but I can assure you we will continue to call on the Royal Brompton and Harefield NHS Trust and NHS England to commit to retaining and enhancing their medical sites in our borough, as agreed in their 2016 planning permission. And we will get back to you as soon as we have any further information. Thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to respond from the Labour Group, please?
That's me, Mr Mayor, Councillor Emma Dent-Code.
Thank you. Councillor Dent-Code.
Thank you very much. I'd be speaking on behalf of Councillor Dr El-Naji, who has a throat infection, who's saving his voice for his meeting with NHS England, Royal Brompton and RBKC, as we've just heard. I will leave the clinical matters to our Chair of Adult Social Care and Health. And I just want to talk briefly about the planning matters, which are absolutely crucial here. And I just want to point out a few things that have already passed. Fowler's Terrace, which was key worker housing, a former nursing home, was agreed by the council to be turned into residential already. We believe that street has not yet been sold, but it has been agreed by the council. It went through committee. The Dove House and Britton Street proposal development, which is they have planning permission to re-provide the imaging suite, the all-important imaging suite, one of the best in the country, in a brand new building, and that has been agreed by the council, and conditions on that have been agreed this very month. So there's clearly a plan B brewing as well. Southern part of Sydney Street, of course, where the farmers market was, has been agreed by the council to be turned into residential, and that was also NHS plot. So while we are the Labour Group remains absolutely against the sale of it, we do want to point out that the council has been 100% complicit so far in agreeing all these NHS absolutely crucial facilities to be turned into residential, including taking away key worker housing. And if we're so committed to medical use and healthcare, we sold our last residential care home, Thamesbrook, and for caviar care for other people, which I believe they're struggling getting people to fill it. So anyway, what I've heard from the planning officers is that we are working towards hopefully having an SPD by the end of the year to come up with alternatives. We will have to fight with our local plan to fight the London plan, which actually allows the erasing of social and community use, which we need to fight for. And we will fight for it, and we will support this. And we've been fighting on this for a very long time. And as somebody who spent a month in that hospital in her teens, very sick indeed, I have a special place for it in my heart as well. And we will fight, but there seem to be a lot of different issues going on here and a lot of different sites. And we won't forget that the council has already rubber stamped the change of use of some of these sites. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dent-Code. Move to question number 3 from Georgina Pomper. Removal of bollards at the top of Latimer Road and reinstate pavements to original form to stop danger to cyclists, cars, residents, children, and stop criminal behaviour on these wide corner pavements. So Councillor Thalasitas, are you going to do that one again?
Yeah, I will. And so thanks to Georgie for the question. I've gotten to know Georgie a bit over the last few weeks. We've been talking about, well, it's all changed on Latimer Road at the moment. We're trying to get a design code for the area together with our residents, co-designing that. We're looking at expanding the conservation area. So there's lots going on to protect and safeguard people's lives and livelihoods in that part of the borough. And on these specific points, I know that Georgie's already been in touch with with our officers. We're looking into the detail of these issues and whether we can help. If there's something we can do, I'm very happy to. And I know that Councillor Bakhtiar, who I presume will respond to this, has been at all of these meetings already and has seen that there's work apace to resolve this.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bakhtiar, are you going to respond to this?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, I was involved from the beginning, but it turned out that this is causing a problem, as Georgina mentioned. So I think it's time to review this and try to assess if we could do and improve this. So I'm happy to work with the officers, with Johnny and the residents to see if we could come up with a better solution for this problem.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. So moving on to question number 4 from Sabrina Halak. How come nobody is answering my questions? As a family, we are all struggling in a temporary accommodation out from the borough for 6 years, and nobody is listening or even getting any kind of help. How can you complain? So I suspect she means how can she complain? Who from the leadership team is going? Councillor Taylor-Smith, are you going to answer that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, obviously, I'm aware of this case now from the name, and I won't discuss specific issues on the case. I think first, let's just start, obviously, with apologies and the fact that obviously this particular lady has been in temporary accommodation out of borough for 6 years. And that obviously is a reflection on the large amount of temporary accommodation we have out of borough, and that's 75% of our 2,300 residents. So clearly, I mean, in order to address this, first of all, we need to build and make sure that we have permanent homes in order to address this long waiting list. And that's obviously very much a subject at the heart of the housing strategy that we've published. And I'm pleased to see yesterday that the planning committee approved the first phase of 97 new homes, 73% of which, will be affordable. I think the issues of quality of the accommodation, again, is something which we're very much focused on within our housing reduction strategy. Clearly, having to encourage third-party landlords to maintain accommodation is always a challenge for us, and we will do that. And I think this particular case has been impacted by the COVID shutdown when it comes to doing works. I think in answer to the simple question, how can you complain? You can certainly complain to me, and you can complain to our housing department, and I will be undertaking to contact Sabrina in order to address the issues that she is finding. Thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to reply from the Labour Group, please?
I would like to reply, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Riley. Sabrina. Again, I do apologise, and I'm so sorry that you are going through this difficult time. 6 years to be in a temporary accommodation is not the right thing. It's not good for family. It's not good for health, and it's not good for anyone not to have the right of mind to be in a temporary accommodation. And we, the Labour Group, the Labour opposition of Kensington and Chelsea, have been arguing for a long time. For example, the new homes that we are going to build after we have been pressuring the council to do it, and finally we have managed to, we are going to build 600 homes. But this is the question: how can we have residents who have been out of borough for 6 years, or even some of them 8 years, and when the council deciding to 25% or even 50% of those new built homes will be sold on a market price, even 25% of them? I think the council, it's about time, Sabrina and everyone else can hear about it, that we should not be selling council built properties on the open market. We should be renting them, and at least 75% of the homes that will be built, 300 of them social homes, and the other 25% of them will be affordable. This is an answer. I think we do not want just an apology. We want the council leadership, especially Councillor Kim Taylor-Smith, to think about it. Just put himself in that position of a family member or families who've been 6 years out of borough and in temporary accommodation. I think everyone should be thinking about not selling the new properties. We are not property developers. We must work for our residents. And if we were to answer the call of Sabrina and her family and all other temporary accommodation residents out of borough and in borough, we shouldn't be thinking about selling properties. We should be thinking about accommodating and building more homes for our residents. And once again, I do apologize, and I'm sorry that we are going through this. And I hope the council will listen, the leadership will listen, and everyone, including the mayor and the residents, will know that the Labour group have been calling new homes to be built and not to be sold, but accommodate our members' long-term temporary accommodation residents. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. So I'd like to thank the members of the public for those questions, and you will in due course get the response formally. So can we move now to item 5, petitions? Do members have any petitions to present? I shall take that as a no and then move on to item 6. I now call upon the leader to address the meeting and Councillor Mason to respond.
Mr. Mayor, in accordance with Standing Order 42, I wish to move that Standing Order 30 be suspended this evening to allow the leader and Councillor Mason up to 10 minutes each for their speeches.
Thank you. Is that seconded?
I second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lowry. So, out of the council, is that agreed? And if so, we will give the leader and the opposition leader 10 minutes. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. It's very lonely here without any voices coming back to me, but thank you. So, leader, I'd like to invite you now to speak up to 10 minutes, please.
Thank you. I should only be about 5, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, these will be my final remarks before the summer. In previous years, it would have been a plea to everyone in the chamber to recharge batteries and come back with ideas and enthusiasms for September. However, this is not a normal year and not a normal summer. It will not be a normal summer break for many of us. It is a summer that is critical for our borough. It will be a summer for businesses to get back on their feet. It'll be a time for families to meet again, some for the first time since lockdown began. It's a summer where, sadly, we will not see carnival on our streets. A summer where we'll have to join the fun online instead. And above all, it will be a summer for us all to continue to control the virus, to stay at home, stay alert, and help to protect lives and livelihoods. Mr. Mayor, the current situation in the borough is a positive one. Businesses are opening, customers are returning, some of our streets are bustling again. The number of our cases in our borough is very low and staying steady, but we are not complacent. We have officers monitoring the situation around the clock. We're requesting more and more data from government so that our decision making can be done calmly and based on up-to-the-minute data. If the situation dictates, we will not hesitate to take any action required to keep our residents safe. In the meantime, we will continue to help support the most vulnerable in our society and work to secure more support for our businesses and their owners. And my plea to residents tonight is this: we are open for business, but we are ready to respond. Please continue to be part of that effort. Continue to look out for each other and continue to keep one another safe. We all have a social responsibility to look out for the person next to us. Every volunteer, every person who cooks for others each day, every doctor, every nurse, every teacher, every person who's helped another during this pandemic is a local hero. We need to keep that patience and that fortitude and work with each other to navigate the months ahead. Mr. Mayor, later on this evening, we'll discuss the impact of the Black Lives Matter movement and diversity. And I use the word discuss rather than debate, and I do so deliberately. It is not a debate, because as I've said before, this council has a firm stance against racism, brutality, and prejudice of any kind. It is not a debate because COVID-19 has raised a truth that might be uncomfortable for some. It is a categoric fact that Black, Asian, and minority ethnic communities are disproportionately affected by this virus. But it's not just the pandemic that this issue speaks to. Tonight is not a debate because it is clear Black lives are in danger and have been for generations. And here in London Centre, we must pay attention to inequality and injustice, and we must oppose racism in all its forms. But the discussion tonight is not just about diversity, it's about unity. Within my own leadership team, 50% of us have parents born outside of the UK, from Greece, Turkey, Poland, Australia, and South Africa. So my point is this: whether black or white, we can all tackle this issue, and we can do so together. So although I see a diverse group of councillors across the council chamber, I see unity in our purpose. I hope our discussion later is a positive one, and I look forward to hearing from colleagues and learning from them and from their experiences. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to turn to two other important topics: our finances and our housing. Two topics linked to the two biggest incidents in our borough in recent times. Firstly, COVID-19 has hit local government hard. It has hit our services hard, and it has hit our finances hard. And we're starting to look at what the last few months mean for the long term. The next phase could be the most difficult for local authorities and residents across the UK. This council is already looking at savings of more than £25 million in the years ahead, and many things will remain uncertain for some time. We face many new challenges, but we will face these with our residents, and we will be honest and upfront about what our options are. Secondly, the Granville Tragedy. We still have our silence at the start of this meeting, and every day we remember those who lost their lives. The tragedy shone a light on social and affordable housing. It put into clear and sharp focus so many of the issues which need to be tackled nationally today. Mr. Mayor, we have made promises since that tragic event in 2017. We promised to turn the housing record of this borough around. We said it would take time, and it has, and it will. And we heard only tonight from Sabrina about her long wait in temporary accommodation. We promised to build and create new homes for social rent. So I am delighted that Kim has now agreed the first phase of a programme to create 600 new homes in the borough. In phase 1, 97 new homes will be created. 71% of those will be affordable housing, and of that, 50% will be available at social rent. Housing that is truly affordable, housing that is targeted to the needs of the borough, housing that is high quality, housing for the vulnerable, housing for key workers, housing to tackle our long waiting lists. Mr. Mayor, we make promises and we keep our promises. We are building housing, and I hope we are also building trust. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Councillor Mason, do you wish to respond?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Well, we will not have a carnival this year on the street, but we will have it online. We will not be recharging our batteries, certainly not in North Kensington, because our residents can't afford to charge their batteries, and so neither will we, because we need to continue serving them. It's been 3 years, over 3 years now, since the Granville atrocity with 72 dead, and they are still looking for justice. And we need to make sure that they get that justice in any way we can. And the finances of the council, as the leader has said, are 26 million whole at the moment because the government is refusing to make up that to make up that difference. And we have just we are moving through COVID. We have many, quite a number of families in the borough who have died and have loved ones who have died and are grieving, and we have the other problem of the street disorder. Of course, we are very glad that that businesses are opening up, although some of the cafes and restaurants tell me they're doing about 35% business. It is the alcohol-related premises that are doing more, and of course the streets are bustling. But in recent weeks, they've been bustling with the wrong type of people, as it were, or the wrong type of activity. We've had many unlicensed music events and street parties going on till in North Kensington, in the Portobello Road area, in the Delgado area, at the Sacred Wall of Truth near Grenfell, perhaps till 3, 4, 5 in the morning, with some dreadful scenes keeping people up. And I'm not quite sure who we should blame first, whether we should blame the police for failing to predict, because they can predict what is happening because it happens day after week, and they know it's happening across London, whether they are failing to predict and then deal with these issues, or whether they don't have enough resources, although the chief superintendent told us only before the COVID crisis that they had even more officers on the force coming on, or whether we should blame the crowds of people who are coming onto the streets, and many of them, as we know, because the police are telling us, are coming from outside of the area into the Portobello Road, into the Nottingdale area, and into other areas of the borough as well. But I can speak mostly for North Kensington because that is an area where I'm a councillor. And if they are coming into our area, as they are in their hundreds, either bringing drink in or thinking that they can come in and create havoc in our area, well, the message is you can't. There will come a point where if the police are not able to deal with those issues, we will.
Thank you very much.
Because I'm not finished, Mr. Mayor.
I didn't speak. I didn't say anything. I think somebody else is on the line.
Somebody did. Because the Portobello and Nottingdale area, these are areas packed full of families and children and elderly people and people with disabilities, and many of those 6,000 shielded people we have in the borough, and they deserve some sort of quality of life and protection as well. And some of the police and some of our community safety people have had emails from both residents and representations from councillors, Colville councillors, Councillor Press, Councillor Blakeman, who have had multiple emails of complaint from residents trying to get more police activity on the streets, trying to ensure that the licensing department either rescinds or limits during the COVID crisis the licenses of some of these offending premises mentioned in those emails. And of course, as I told the police some weeks ago on the street in Portobello Road, an inspector can look and decide that there's a disorder or a breaching of the social distancing rules as they were then, and ask a premises to close down, and that has happened on a couple of occasions. So we in the Labour government are going to meet with one of the most senior officers next week. But that is a problem, and I know it's a problem across the country, it's across the borough, but it is simply quite a big problem here. And so if anyone out there, because we're told many of those people are coming here and that they're bringing alcohol here. And I saw in an email where a senior officer in community safety said that, of course, they are bringing alcohol here and that they are selling it from the boots of cars. Well, excuse me, but that is actually illegal. You have to have a premises license to sell alcohol. So these issues have been going, and we've had on top of that a stream of reports from the police about stabbings, about burglaries, about people attacked. We get them almost on a daily basis. So the violence goes alongside these street events that, as I say, go on quite often till 3, 4, 5 in the morning. And whatever the police are doing, they're not doing enough, and they're not stopping them, and they're not assuaging residents, and these residents are kept up to 4, 5, 6 in the morning, and the people who come here have no respect whatsoever for these residents. And as I say, if this were to continue on, the people of North Kensington have shown in the past that they will not put up with people coming into our area creating these problems. And if they don't deal with it, we will deal with it ourselves. This is not a play area. This is an area where people live cheek to jowl, and we have to, the business has to coexist, and the people who come here have to coexist with the people who live here and work here, and that is what we and what our residents want, and what they say in emails. And you members of the council who are in responsible positions will have seen those emails. So this is something that we are aware of and we pursue, and the whole Labour group is receiving these email issues, these issues on email, and people expect an answer, and they expect the police and us to do our job and ensure that these people don't use our area like some kind of playground or festival, which it isn't, because they bring in lots of noisy equipment and speakers into the night and so on. And so we are going to pursue that. Now, if I could just finish, Mr. Mayor, by saying that just over a week ago, I attended the funeral service of Joan Monders, who lived on Warrington Green Estate in Goulburn Ward, I represent. And she lived there for 57 years. Joan was 81 years old and was born at the start of the Second World War during the rationing years, before the NHS. Joan was at the centre of a large family of siblings and grandchildren who relied on her for advice and support. And it was clear from the moving tributes they gave at her funeral how much they loved and would miss her, and they are spread across our borough, in fact, not just North Kensington. And when Joan was 78 years old, probably she should have been taking things easy and enjoying spending her time with her sons and daughters, who would often visit the children of an afternoon or evening. And as tough as life became, they could at least spend those moments together. But these happy moments, Mr. Mayor, were shattered on the 17th of June 2017, when her son Gary Monders died in the Grenfell fire. This was an enormous shock to Joan, from which she never recovered, and cried every day for her son and couldn't talk about it for at least a year. And these two were very, very close. And these two were close, and I don't believe that any parent, Mr. Mayor, can ever recover from a son or daughter dying, no matter how old they are. And so Joan, like many of those bereaved families, watched the inferno on TV, not having heard that her missing family members had escaped, and they feared the worst, and so did Joan, and she told me that is what happened. She never lived long enough to see the day when justice will be done for those who were murdered in the Grenfell fire. But I hope that her family will see justice done for Gary's death, because many of those parents are elderly and they will die without seeing justice, Mr. Mayor. And I do not believe that a public inquiry that simply may or may not fine companies who may have erred, I think and believe, and the bereaved families and survivors think and believe, and Joan believed, that the way to make sure that these things never happen again is to make sure that the ministers and the directors and the people who may or may be found guilty by the Metropolitan Police of serious offences, that they should be sitting in a prison cell, Mr. Mayor. And when they are sitting in prison cells, then the others will make sure that they don't just think about profits and dividends and the bottom line, but they think that they're there to provide safe housing for people. And that is what I promised Joan when she was alive, and that is what I and my group will make sure that we try to do, that we will do our small part to make sure that there is justice for these people. And for these unlicensed music events, Mr. Mayor, we will make sure that these people do not come here and use us as some kind of playground. It's not going to happen any longer. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Thank you. So can we now move to item number 7, order of business. In accordance with standing orders, I rule that the order of business shall be as printed in the agenda, with the exception that motion 3 on Black Lives Matters will be taken second when we reach the motions. So item 8, urgent key decisions. Urgent key decisions taken since January are shown in item 8, and I ask the council to note them. Item 9, report from the Administration Committee. I call upon the leader to move the reception of the report and Councillor Kamali to second.
I'd like to move, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
I beg to second, Mr. Mayor.
Would any member like to contribute for up to 5 minutes?
I would, Mr. Mayor, and I hope I won't use 5 minutes. 3.1 of the 3.1 of the report says that the Constitution is a living document, and that that the revised version was adopted on the 24th of July 2019 Council meeting, which it was. At that same meeting, the Council approved the new Select Committee system of scrutiny, and the Labour Group tabled an amendment to that report the majority party did not support. So, of course, we voted against the scrutiny report and the new Constitution. The contents of our amendment are on record, so I'm not going to entirely rehearse it here, except to say that one of the main demands was retention of the Grenfell Recovery Scrutiny Committee that many bereaved families and survivors repeatedly told Labour councillors and the council at many meetings that they wanted us to keep. One of our motivations for North Kensington councillors joining the select committees at the May AGM just gone, after being out for 9 months, is to strengthen, or to try to strengthen, the role of the scrutiny process. And to test in the coming scrutiny review if the Grenfell recovery strategy and the scrutiny spend dispersed across 5 committees is working effectively. I mean, Mr. Mayor, I have to ask why 2 years after the recovery strategy was activated, I and other North Kensington councillors are still receiving questions challenging the delivery and spend from some bereaved families and survivors if the scrutiny process is working so well. And only yesterday, 2 days, I don't know if anyone else received them, I received 8 substantial questions from bereaved families and survivors Grenfell group that some may say were answered previously, but obviously they were not. And if they were, they did not understand, or they don't agree with the premise of the answers. But on this actual report, we are not in principle opposed to the proposed Administration Committee terms of reference, and may support the contract regulation changes when we see them, because it's always useful, Mr. Mayor, to see what you're being asked to vote for, which we don't have here. But we will abstain on the readoption of the Constitution at the moment until we will presumably be asked to approve a new version after the coming scrutiny review, I will assume. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to comment on this matter?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to comment very briefly as the chair of the Administration Committee. As you can see in front of you, the report recommends there are some revisions to the Constitution, and it's really about changing the Administration Committee's terms of reference and streamlining it. But the Administration Committee will still retain powers to consider and make recommendations to full council about the proposals for change in governance. And I'd just like to pick up on what Councillor Mason has just said. You know, of course, we welcome Labour back on scrutiny after 9 months not working for scrutiny. And I'm sorry that during the time since they've come back, Labour councillors haven't been able to find information about funding of Grenfell recovery, because it is on the website and it has been considered by 4 scrutiny reports. However, we will be sending out, in the edition of North Ken News later this month, a full look at where the funding on Grenfell is going, because we understand there are some questions about it. On the other point that Councillor Mason raised, I think I may as well pick it up. We are looking for a review of the scrutiny process, because this time last year, we put in a new process and we said, we'll look at it after a year. But because we've had COVID-19, and because we then had part of the election, and then because we had Labour refusing to take part in it, seems silly to have the scrutiny, look at scrutiny now. So we've suggested we do it in January and then bring a report in something like March. And then again, once we've looked at that, we'll have another review another year later, so that any changes that we suggest to the Constitution we can put in whenever when we've won, when that after the next election, the new council can then adopt it. So that's where we are with all the governance changes, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much.
I need to correct one point. The leader.
Councillor Mason, you have spoken on this. Can you make it a very brief correction?
I've spoken, but we did not refuse to take part in scrutiny. The leader has conveniently gone back to her position in 2019. We did not. We continued to take part in scrutiny, but not on the scrutiny committee. And you know the reasons why we did that.
So you've corrected it. Thank you. Thank you. So the council is asked to approve the specific recommendations set out in Para 2.1 and to approve the re-adoption of the whole constitution as set out in Para 3.1. Is that agreed? Can I ask the two whips, please? Is that agreed?
Agreed.
The Labour Group abstains.
Okay. Councillor Wade?
Agreed.
Councillor Palmer? Are there no Councillor Palmer? So I declare that carried. So item 10, report of the Family Services.
Mayor, I am here and I'll support it.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So it is carried. Item 10, report of the Family Services Select Committee. I call upon Councillor Evans to move the reception of the report and Councillor Durian to second. Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm glad I have everyone's.
So you're going to propose it? Thank
yes,
you.
Indeed.
Councillor Durian.
Please to second the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Would anybody, councillors, like to speak? I'll ask Councillor Evans to conclude once there's been any comments, if I may, Councillor Evans.
I would like to speak on both reports, please.
Thank you very much. Councillor Blakeman. Councillor Blakeman, would you like to speak?
Right, yes. First of all, on the first working group report, thank you to Councillor Dorian for the report. I'm not surprised it was the residents who asked for the investigation, because in the immediate aftermath of the Grenfell Tower fire, promises were made to replace all the facilities within the tower, as well as rehousing all the residents. So while rehousing has taken a while in getting there, the boxing club reopened quite some time ago, but the replacement of the Grenfell nursery seems to be put on the back burner. Initially, there was an excellent engagement with the residents of Lancaster West Estate, and a range of architects produced ideas books. Included in one of the ideas books was a plan to extend the current Eylis Booker nursery to take over what had been lost at Grenfell. Sadly, this proposal was ignored, and the council spent a lot of time searching for alternative space, even as far away as the further end of Silchester Estate, in an attempt to take over their community rooms, which didn't go down well. In the meantime, the Lancaster West Childcare Network had to make some staff redundant, and the estate lost its drop-in play facility. Ward councillors and Councillor Nail attended meetings of desperate parents who relied on that facility to keep working or to stay in higher education. Finally, a solution was found, but at the expense of the loss of good childcare workers, to say nothing of the anguish caused to those parents. The future of the drop-in centre is still uncertain, although it's still an essential service needed by local residents. I understand the matter of two separate planning applications, but consulting with neighbours on one replacement but not the other could cause some upset down the line. Consultation on the revised proposal to extend Eylis Booker has begun. I tried to find it on the new council website and it took some time, so I've sent the link to local residents affected to save them the effort of trying to find it. No one seems to have told them yet about this consultation, at least not those residents most immediately impacted by the new development. Those are my criticisms. However, I would like to commend the new leadership team member for Family and Children's Services, Councillor Rendell, who immediately arranged a detailed briefing for ward councillors on the proposals for the Lancaster West Childcare Network when we asked. Although this council adopted the Charter for Public Participation from the 1st of March, it seems that ward councillors were to be excluded, despite numerous earlier requests for information. There are some local issues that still need to be ironed out. but I'm now more confident that the needs and views of local people will be taken into account, despite the new culture change of hiding consultations from any resident who does not slavishly follow Nextdoor or social media, which is a lot of our residents. I do hope that this working group will be reconstituted and continue its work, as there remains much more still to be done. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Atkinson, I understand you wish to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I be heard now?
Well,
thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, I want to be even-handed, so I have two things to say. My first point is highly critical of the council, and to balance that, my second point is to be highly critical of the government. The point I want to start on comes under Appendix 1, Para 4.5, which points out that in 2018, the DFE estimated that in Kensington and Chelsea, there were 713 families eligible for 30 hours of care. And by spring 2018, we only had 205. Mr. Mayor, as you'll be aware, I've served on the Family and Children's Services Committee for many, many years, and this has happened time after time after time. And it really seems to me that the council should be making more of an effort to find those families who are eligible for the 30 hours care, because as I said, is said elsewhere in the report, those children most in need, those are the ones that turn up at the age of 5 unable to, who are behind. And I think there's been an awful lot of attention paid in the last 20 odd years. And before Councillor Hammond reminds me, that does include Labour governments, far too much attention paid to higher education and not enough attention paid to early years. Look after children when they're 3 and 4, and it will be an investment for everybody. So I really think this council, and I hope that the committee will look at that rather telling statistic and do something about it in the next year. The second point I want to make, it concerns with national government policy, which again has been pointed out over and over again, that in order for younger children to get 30 hours care, but the parents need to be in work. And parents of children with special educational needs, almost by definition, the caring parent, which is nearly always a woman, can't work. And therefore, it seems to me they are the most needy people who in need of extra help from any source. And I think it's wicked that unless parents are in work, younger children don't qualify for the 30 hours care. Those are my 2 points, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Atkinson. Councillor Evans, would you like to sum up and comment, please?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the opportunity this evening to present to you and to all members as chair of the Family Services Select Committee. The reports and recommendations are a result of 2 reviews undertaken by the Select Committee and agreed at our meeting on the 22nd of June. Our meeting was the first Select Committee in the entire country that was able to come in on time with a full meeting. I want to thank our scrutiny officers for being able to do that. And I also would like to thank Councillor Adorian and his working group for an excellent report. On childcare, we are making detailed recommendations to further support childcare provision in the areas affected, to support parents with childcare costs, and to support childminder and after-school provision. We realize the importance, we realize the support that families need, and we look forward to getting having this approved and getting the answers back from the lead member, Josh Rendell.
Thank you very much, Councillor Evans. So, the council is recommended to refer the report to Councillor Rendell, lead member for Family Services, for response. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Agreed, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much indeed. So, Para 2, school exclusions.
May I speak, Mr. Mayor?
You may indeed. Councillor Blakeman.
Thank you. Yeah, this is an excellent first report, and I hope that the next phase will carry out more in-depth research on the outstanding issues that it identified. However, When I first read it, I hoped to understand why the Latimer Tri-Borough Alternative Provision Academy, which local residents still call the Pupil Referral Unit, was peremptorily and without notice closed down early last year due to urgent health and safety issues, and I'd like to know what those issues were. Most of the pupils were transferred as a priority to other providers. However, no alternative arrangements were made for years 9 and 10. Those pupils were to receive home visits, but otherwise were left to their own devices, which presumably explains why so many of them were left on the streets. I was alerted to this by local residents, but despite raising an inquiry, I was fobbed off. There were also around 40 pupils at the academy from Hammersmith and Fulham, and we still don't know what alternative arrangements were made for them. I understand that the then leadership team member for Family and Children's Services received a full briefing about this issue, and the then Member of Parliament, Councillor Dent Code, received a rather less informative briefing. The ward councillors were first ignored and then misled about what had happened. If this had happened before the Grenfell Tower fire, we would have written it off as a further manifestation of the actions of a Conservative elected dictatorship. However, this happened after the fire, when the council had adopted the Nolan Principles as part of our culture change. These principles include a commitment to be open and transparent. Sadly, it seems that when the working group visited the Latimer Academy, they were not told about the short-term closure and the failure of the Academy's duty to a number of its pupils. I note that the teaching at the Academy is very good, the teachers are inspirational, and the working group noticed the poor state of the building. Indeed, we've just approved a key decision for work to bring it up to a decent standard. But the Select Committee needs to be informed of these problems and reassured that the Latimer Academy is safe to occupy pending the remedial building works. And what still worries me is the management of this academy. It seems that in 2018 to 19, the government gave the trust emergency loans of nearly £1 million and issued it with the financial notice to improve. I understand that this notice is still in place, so members of the council do need to know whether the trust has a sound business plan and whether the academy will be solvent going forward. The trust has said that it expects to repay its emergency loan to the government by November 2020 and achieve a budget in 2021, surplus, in 2021. Is this still a viable aspiration? We need to know. I'm surprised that none of this was told to the working group when they prepared their report. The issues were belatedly raised at the last Select Committee, and a briefing has been produced by the Director for Education. However, there is still no mention of the abrupt closure of the academy, nor of the financial position of the trust that manages this academy. The problem is that this is now a known unknown. It therefore begs the question as to how many unknown unknowns are still festering within the council, unknown to members other than the leadership team. We as a council are committed to restoring the trust of the North Kensington communities in the council, but this is a very poor way of going about it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Now, do you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
I welcome the report in school exclusion and I agree in all its findings. Although the new leadership member should not be asked on his own to identify the reasons of the problem. And by the group admission that it wasn't a comprehensive or exhaustive report. There is a need for further examination into the issue of school exclusion, exclusion policies, and the impact on the young people's life. A new working group must meet with young people who are directly affected and with young people at schools to have their views on behavior policies and the way it has been implemented. We need to examine the system that is for many years persistent in excluding the most vulnerable children from certain ethnic background and the children with special needs and disability in order to address the reasons and take actions. The systematic abuse in our education system is not designed to give those vulnerable children any chance of a better outcome in life. We need to question as well the lack of diversity within school workforce and the negative impact on young people. The school exclusion issue is not a question of just a total of number. It's a question of social justice and fairness. A parent has told me that their son had suffered from a nervous breakdown as a result of being threatened by a school governor, saying to him, if you get more one detention, you will be excluded permanently and you will end up in the street. And we will write a report that will not allow you to be admitted to any school anymore. So school governors play a big part, and some councillors sitting here are school governors. They should receive training so they can help to shape the school culture and help them with their role in the exclusion process as well. And they can as well scrutinize school behavior policies and practices rather than siding with the school against these vulnerable young people. Another parent experience as well with early help team wasn't helpful and a waste of time, according to her testimony. This council must train its council officers in early help team, especially so they understand the issue surrounding exclusion and behavior policies in schools, and provide the support needed for those vulnerable young people and their families. The council must encourage schools to take up teachers' development and training, so they are well equipped to support children at risk from exclusion. We all know the impact on those who expelled is devastating and causes a lasting damage. And just added to the statistic of youth crimes. This council must improve the range of support available, especially for young people and children in schools, in particular social, emotional, and mental health support. This council leadership must help our schools to prevent exclusion and support our children so they can stay in mainstream schools. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Councillor Evans, do you wish to sum up this section, please?
Yes, please. On school exclusions, we highlighted the plight of children with special needs and the overrepresentation of boys of Afro-Caribbean heritage. There's a disproportionate amount of young people of that background who have been excluded, and we asked the lead member to work to improve the early identification of educational needs and to set out his assessment of why there is such an overrepresentation of boys of Afro-Caribbean heritage among children excluded. We are presenting this for Councillor Nile just to know, because the lead member will go back to his officers and they will look at the different programs involved and what we can do to improve them. We are doing this now before we get to our October meeting to do the work program. We are taking on board that this has to have maybe another working group, but we need to be working on it right now, and that is what we are asking the lead member to do with his officers. I also would like to suggest that thank Councillor Hammond for the excellent work of his and for driving his working group. We realize it's a much bigger subject and has to be continued, whether we continue it through a working group or through informatives and very important officers' reports. We will be pursuing this issue. And not only have the council, the select committee members done superb work on behalf of our children and families in Kensington and Chelsea, but we are preparing to do even better work this year. And we are thankful that the minority group has been joining us for this endeavor, because we know your input and insight will further our reach and hone our work. In Washington, there used to be a reporter, an English reporter called Diana McLean, and she was called the Ear. Well, we now have on my committee 2 ears, Councillor Nail and Councillor Bakeman, because you have your ears to the ground in wards that are very important to us. And we'd like to take this opportunity for you to send in suggestions and from your residents who are either watching or viewing this meeting to please tell us what they think. And by speaking to you and to all councillors in the borough, we can check what interests people, and these are very important topics to scrutinize. So please, councillors, do your work and have your residents or you send in suggestions to scrutiny@rbkc.gov.uk. So now we have ears and eyes in the community from both parties. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So the council is recommended to refer the report to Councillor Rendell, lead member for Family Services, for response.
Agreed.
Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much.
May I come in and just do a bit of a sum up from my position, if possible?
Just very briefly, please. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to Councillor Evans, Councillor Blakeman, Councillor Niall, and Councillor Atkinson, and everyone else who spoke this evening. I'd just like to quickly sum up, and I thank the Select Committee for the report. As we discussed at the 22nd of June, both excellent reports that we're taking away to take a look in greater detail. Just on a couple of points that I thought I would raise that for the benefit of the full council. As Councillor Blakeman rightly said earlier, that there has been some challenges with the Granville Nursery in the past. However, I think we're making good progress now. Currently, consultation is underway with residents that's ending in 7th of August, and we're looking at to complete the nursery in September next year, 2021, obviously planning dependent. We're planning to consult first on the nursery and then afterwards on the stay and play, highlighting that the stay and play is coming a bit later. On Latimer Academy, yeah, Judith, yes, I agree. I'm taking this up and looking this for you. You know what the big issue this has been for yourself, Councillor Mills, and others who are pushing on this. So I'm looking to that for you and see what we can kind of work out in regards to that. And lastly, I'd like to thank Councillor Nail for her tremendous passion pushing the exclusion report. I know what the big issue that is for her. And as I said, the recommendations in the report we're taking away to look at to see what we can do in this regard. But thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to the committee.
Thank you. So now move to item number 11, question to lead members. Question 1, and I call upon Councillor Blakeman to read her question, which is printed in the agenda. Councillor Blakeman, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Will the council assist all care homes, including the Royal Hospital, sheltered housing schemes and hostels in the borough, to protect their residents from a second wave of COVID-19 more effectively than they did in the first wave?
Thank you. Councillor Addenbrook, do you wish to answer that question at the meeting, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Throughout the first wave of this global pandemic, the council worked tirelessly with the NHS to effectively support care homes and providers who care for those most at risk from COVID-19 due to age, ethnicity, or with pre-existing health conditions. We supported care homes, sheltered housing schemes, and all other types of social care provision, working together with the local NHS, our provider organisations, and local residents. These groups have worked tirelessly and effectively together, interpreting and applying the evolving national guidance and resources, as well as taking our own initiatives to ensure that people have been kept as safe as possible. No emergency response is ever perfect, but I pay tribute to all involved for their dedication, rapid response, learning lessons and dealing with issues as they arose. So some of the actions we have taken are daily calls to check in on current status and any help that was needed. The care homes were cocooned several weeks before national guidance. We provided iPads to enable residents to stay in contact with their families, a single central system for sourcing and distributing PPE, testing and staff for residents 2 weeks before the national testing portal was functional, and repeat testing via the local GP Federation, securing access to emergency beds so that residents discharged from hospital did not return to a care home immediately on discharge, advice on infection control from North West London NHS teams, and we established a supplier relief fund to support care homes and their staff. And we will continue to provide support to all our care homes for as long as required to ensure they remain safe and as well protected as possible. Action was taken at the start of the pandemic to protect vulnerable residents living in sheltered housing and hostels and on the street. Our decisions to close night shelters, to house rough sleepers and provide extensive infection control guidance to hostels is likely to have prevented a significant number of cases. We have daily surveillance in place with an effective and tailored test and trace system for individuals living in hostels and a solution for those not able to self-isolate where they are. The Council manages 6 sheltered housing schemes, and we have ensured these and all registered social landlords are aware of protocols for reporting cases and have supported their efforts to protect residents from COVID-19 by sharing good practice. There are over 70 settings and over 1,500 beds in supported accommodation, including mental health pathways, refuges and accommodation for socially excluded. All these settings and any shared facilities have been documented in order to intensify support, particularly where there are shared spaces. Housing staff have been in frequent contact with providers to ensure they have adequate stocks of PPE, have access to parking, and are still able to provide a service despite staff having to self-isolate. Providers have been regularly briefed on the evolving guidance from both government and Public Health England and are able to contact the Council's housing and public health teams if they have any queries. Alternative placements have been offered to symptomatic service users and those clinically vulnerable to COVID-19 in order to permit shielding. Public Health are in the process of giving training to all providers to recap on the guidance and support providers as lockdown measures are eased. Environmental Health are also helping us to prioritise those with highest need in HMOs due to occupancy and shared facilities, and have already sent out prevention guidance, and we are following this up with further communications. The Public Health team are briefed daily by Public Health England on concerns re COVID-19 cases, settings, populations and geographical areas. So housing, adults and families and children are also exploring if they can add any other warning information. So if you have any other particular areas of concern, please do get in contact with me after this meeting and I would be happy to look into it.
Thank you. Councillor Blakeman, do you have a follow-up question?
Yes, I do. That was a very comprehensive response. The difficulty is that none of this information seems to be getting through to us on the ground. I mean, I mentioned the Royal Hospital specifically because they seem to have had a massive number of deaths. But there are a number of sheltered housing schemes in Notting Dale ward that I represent. They're not just run by the council, but also by Notting Hill Genesis, Anchor Housing and Octavia. But I'm not aware of any much cooperation between us and the other providers about the impact of coronavirus. And I think this is the case in a number of other wards. I live very close to the council sheltered housing accommodation in Notting Dale, and I'm getting a bit worried about the number of times I see ambulances outside and stretchers being taken in. I've tried to get more information about what's going on, but it's been denied. And I wondered if it was possible for you to draw together a report on what all the providers are doing to protect and support this very vulnerable group of residents for the next Community Resilience Group meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Addenbrooke, do you want to quickly respond to that, please?
Councillor Bateman, I can certainly ask Public Health to put together a report. I'm not sure it's going to be possible by this Friday, but I will ask them.
Thank you very much. So we now move to item 12. Does any member wish to raise a matter under Standing Order 11 and speak for up to 2 minutes?
Yes, please.
Councillor Wade?
Yes, please. If the government plans go forward to create development corporations, what are the implications for the Earls Court development area? A revised master plan for the 40-acre site is due shortly, and if designated a development corporation, would this remove the rights and powers of the local authority? This raises a number of key issues. Is the site still an opportunity area? Would the present RBKC policies of delivery of 35% affordable housing be applied? Would the proportion be social rented, affordable rented, or intermediate? Would there be security of tenure on the buy-to-let scheme? Will the social rented homes be delivered equally across the site? Concerns have also been raised as to the timing of the £100,000 donation made by Delancey to the Conservative Party after the disposal of the West Kensington and Gibbs Green estate to Hammersmith and Fulham. So we must ensure total transparency going forward. Furthermore, it's of concern that the composition of the Quality Review Panel does not reflect any local membership, or any recommendations can be considered academic rather than reflect any local knowledge or character. In a recent poll asking who had the most power in the planning system, community groups and local residents accounted for 4%. That does not say a lot about meaningful consultation. So the question has to be asked, are the right people being consulted? In conclusion, the National Design Guide, it states demographics are also driving change with an aging population, and younger people's expectations are changing too. We need a development that serves our needs now and in the future. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much for that. And does anybody else wish to raise a matter under Standing Order 11?
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor. It's Councillor Monica Press.
Councillor Press, thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, Portobello Market is not just the heart of North Kensington's local economy, but one of the key drivers of income across the borough for hotels, hospitality, retail and services as regards its international and national reputation as one of the world's greatest street markets. So its full recovery and its safe and healthy recovery is therefore surely a priority for this council. And I know it is for Councillor Kamali, and I appreciate his very regular presence at market recovery meetings. However, some 6 weeks after the relaxing of lockdown and the closure of the Portobello Road, there are few signs of secure measures for its recovery, and social distancing has not been achieved. Most local residents and permanent traders are not yet ready to return. Fruit and veg stores have no health and safety plastic sheeting around their sides, and the food is open and exposed. Sellers of hot food are not required to wear a face covering, and social distancing is not being enforced or controlled by barriers. The market has been in crisis and struggling for many years. I ask you to imagine what the impact will be on the future of the market if it is associated with an outbreak of the virus and has to be closed again. We will never recover, and the council's reputation will suffer. At last, the government now mandates face covering in shops, TfL and National Rail mandate masks on public transport, local authorities can mandate local lockdown due to a virus outbreak. This borough can, and this borough should, mandate face coverings for traders of food and fruit and veg work who are working in enclosed gazebos in a council-managed market. And this borough can mandate face coverings to residents and visitors wanting to come to the most famous market in the world. For example, we could give out free masks at entry points. I urge the leadership to discuss this with some urgency and mandate face covering in Portobello Market.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Press. Can I just remind members that under Standing Order 11, person raising the issue can be expected for a response from the relevant lead member within 6 weeks. So thank you for those. Can we then move on to motions, please? We have 3 motions on tonight's agenda. When it comes Time to vote on the motions and amendments. I'll ask the whips to indicate which way their party colleagues are voting. I shall give members the opportunity to say if they are not voting in line with their whips, and also ask Councillor Palmer and Councillor Wade individually to indicate which way they are voting. So motion number 1, modern slavery. I now call upon motion 1 on modern slavery and ask Councillor Idris formally to move the motion standing in her name, and Councillor Schmetterling to formally second.
I beg to move, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
I second the motion.
Good. Councillor Idris, you now have up to 5 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, all. Modern slavery is an umbrella term which includes forced labor, domestic servitude, sexual exploitation, criminal exploitation, and organ harvesting. Estimations of its scale vary from 13,000 to 136,000 victims in the UK. Data suggest that in 2019, there were at least 60 to 80 victims of modern slavery identified as being exploited in the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea. These cases included child criminal exploitation through drug trafficking known as county lines, domestic servitude, sexual exploitation, and forced labor. Our borough has been proactively responding to modern slavery since it launched the EU-funded European Communities Against Trafficking project in 2013, with an established multi-agency partnership group and dedicated member of staff through a partnership with Stop the Traffic. RBKC is regarded as one of the leading London boroughs in the fight against modern slavery. Mr. Mayor, with the launch of referral pathway, quarterly training opportunities for staff, and development of a modern slavery strategy to be published this year, the Council Modern Slavery Work Programme is advancing. As this borough is already demonstrating best practice in its coordinated community response to this issue, the Community Safety Team and the Procurement Team is working together to produce an annual modern slavery statement, exploring the council supply chain with the aim of ensuring they are free from exploitation. As a matter of fact, last month, a draft statement titled Transparency in Supply Chain Modern Slavery Statement was produced and delivered to the Contract Commissioning Board for feedback before being presented to the leadership team in September and published for Anti-Slavery Day in October. The statement will include an action plan and may require changes to procurement and recruitment policy. It aims to influence the council's supply chain to scrutinize their own practices to ensure a coordinated community response to tackling modern slavery. We all have a part to play. As a council, we are duty-bound to ensure our supply chain, contracted and subcontracted, is free from exploitation. As residents, we must be vigilant and report suspicious incidences when we witness or learn about them. We, as councillors, can quarterly access training to give us the tools and the know-how to spot the inhumane trade. Please pay attention to the signs. Victims usually show fearlessness, anxiousness, fearfulness, anxiousness, distress of authority. Also look for physical and psychological traumas, untreated injuries, indication of not knowing their home address or where they live. Also pay attention for stories that sound too rehearsed and too prepared, or those who do not speak because someone else is speaking for them. But the biggest sign of all is in the eyes. The light is turned off and they look lifeless. Working together, I am sure we can defeat this evil. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Schmetterling, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes. Slavery has been with humankind for thousands of years. The most famous earlier case is the biblical one of the Israelites in Egypt. We know that 500 years ago, vast numbers of African slaves were brought to Latin America by various slave traders from various countries. And of course, today we have been reminded of one tragic aspect of this, namely the bringing of slaves to North America. In the 19th and 20th centuries, there was a considerable trade in slaves between Africa and Muslim lands. In the 20th century, the most prominent example of slavery was the enslavement of mostly, but not only, Jewish people by the Nazi German regime and its lackeys in Europe. Did you know that in World War II, slave labor was brought into German-occupied Alderney? There are many other examples in different parts of the world. And who sold the local people to the foreign traders? Let's not forget the traders like the ones in Nigeria who did the procurement and selling in a region where there had been slavery before the Europeans arrived. It is complicated about the color of the skin, but about power, the power of one group of people over another. Already early on, there was a recognition that there was something fundamentally wrong with slavery. Indeed, the Hebrew Bible, originating 3,300 years ago, which in any case recognizes that everyone is made in the image of God, gives rights to slaves and even prescribes a procedure for freeing them, a radical notion for those days. To mention a couple of later examples, the Spanish Catholic Church in the 16th century started agitating for better treatment of slaves and indeed the abolition of slavery in Latin America. In 1833, the British government and Parliament not only passed an act abolishing slavery and freeing slaves, nods here to Thomas Clarkson and William Wilberforce, MP for Hull and later Yorkshire, the Royal Navy started patrolling the high seas for slave traders. And we all know about the Civil War in the USA mid-19th century. Here are some nuggets, courtesy of my good friend, Professor Google. Did you know that slavery was outlawed in Oman in 1970, Qatar in 1952, Saudi Arabia and Yemen both in 1962, that Mauritania abolished slavery in 1981 and only finally criminalized it in 2007, and that Sudan formally abolished slavery only in 2014? Like I said, it's complicated. Slavery is vile. It is abhorrent. We know that there is slavery still going on, as stated in the motion, even right here in the UK. The Council proposes to publish an annual modern slavery statement, which is to set out the work it is doing to tackle modern slavery through the Council's supply chain. It is only right that we do our bit and publish such a statement. I am very pleased to second the motion.
Thank you. Other members wish to speak for up to 5 minutes.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Mason.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Well, Councillor Idris, of course, is right. We must defeat this evil, and we must be vigilant. And Councillor Smetterling said, of course, that it's power, one group trying to exert power over another, and in this case, for profit, very often for profit. And of course, the UK Modern Slavery Act came into force in 2015, as you will know, and Section 54 of that Act requires every organisation with global annual turnover of 36 million or more, which carries out business or part of the business in the UK, to produce a slavery and human trafficking statement for each financial year. The statement should set out the steps the organisation has taken that year to identify and eradicate modern slavery from its business and its supply chain. Now, the reason I mentioned that, Mr. Mayor, is because Councillor Idris said we must be vigilant, and we in the Labour Group, as you will know, or certainly the previous councils will know, that we have been examining and dissecting our Treasury management statement for some years now, for just some of these reasons. Because for the purpose of tonight, the Business and Human Rights Resource Centre, which, as you will know, is an international NGO that assesses about 8,000 different companies internationally, certainly those FTSE 100 companies, and they do it every year to see if they are complying with this Act and if their statements are living up to what they are promising. And for the year 2018, they looked at 75% of them did reply. And just a few snippets in terms of the companies we may be working or funding or investing in. in their forms, the parts, for example, structure, business and supply chains that they were asked about, most companies failed to provide an adequate explanation of their business model on location of operations, including subsidiaries. About 45% of companies did not provide information on the structure of their supply chains, the goods and services they procure, or where their suppliers are located by region. On policies in relation to slavery and trafficking, fewer than 20% of companies reported they prohibited imposition of any financial burdens, for example, withholding wages or imposing recruitment fees or other expenses on workers in their own operations by its suppliers or by recruitment agencies. Eradicating recruitment fees is seen as key to stamping out modern slavery, as they lead to indebtedness of migrant workers and increasing the risk of bonded labour. And in the due diligence process part of it, forms, fewer than 15% of companies reported having engaged directly with workers or trade unions. Engaging directly with key stakeholders such as workers, trade unions and local NGOs is important to identify risks, particularly in the lower, less visible tiers of the supply chain, and building relationships with these groups will assist companies to develop ways to prevent or mitigate those risks before they result in harm. And about 75% of companies reported having a grievance mechanism, such as a telephone hotline or website for workers to report concerns or complaints without fear of retaliation about this. And you won't be surprised to hear that the company, the Business and Human Rights company, found that none of them would agree that any allegation or complaint had ever been made, and so they concluded, the companies couldn't conclude or hadn't concluded that the system wasn't working. And overall, they were saying basically that the fact of making a statement, overwhelmingly, these companies are not actually doing anything about the statement. Actually, we can see in the press every day that that is the case. So the point I'm making this point is that we are investing in a plethora of different companies, or people are doing it on our behalf, and organisations like the Business and Human Rights Resource Centre and Oxfam, because I've read their reports as well, are making similar statements to the ones I've attributed here, because I'm making it because I don't have time to go through a lot of information.
Just 1 minute, please, Councillor.
But most of them are paying lip service to the slavery statements of the kind that we will, of course, sign up to, and hopefully we will adhere to those, and maybe our contractors will. But most of the companies that we're doing business with and realising profit from, these are the people I'm talking about here, and these reports are talking about, and they may be making statements, but many of them are actually involved, and their subsidiaries are abroad. Hundreds of them and thousands of them, according to these reports, are involved in using and benefiting from slave labour still now, even if they're making statements. So we need to look at that investment programme. We need to look at those companies that people are investing in on our behalf, because there's no point in us as a council doing what the motion says if we are investing and supporting slave labour through our investment policies and the people who are doing it for us. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much indeed. Bang on the 5 minutes. Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Mason. Councillor Chowan, do you wish to speak? Councillor Chowan, do you wish to speak? Councillor Dent Code, would you like to speak?
Yes, sorry, I had problems switching the mic. Yes, I'm here. Yes,
Councillor Dent Code, I'll come to you afterwards. Thank you. Councillor Chowan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm grateful to the councillors Idris and Schmetterling for bringing this motion to the chamber, but somewhat saddened to learn that in our borough, women are being treated as commodities and men are trapped in debt bondage. I believe Councillor Idris said there were 60 to 80 people like this in our borough. However, on a positive note, I am reassured that the work done by the community safety team and the officers in becoming one of the leading boroughs in the fight against modern slavery and becoming an exemplary in practice is quite reassuring. The modern slavery, this modern slavery is often hidden in plain sight, as we've mentioned, and the council must tackle exploitation wherever it is found. And as Councillor Idris has said,
we also have a role to play by recognising the signs of modern slavery, which is reiterated, and sharing this information to help the most vulnerable within our community and in turn prevent this crime from happening. The council website does give us routes of reporting concerns and includes the Modern Slavery Helpline telephone number. Mr. Mayor, I welcome the yearly modern slavery statement outlining the council's approach and support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dent-Coad.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I'm very glad that we're talking about this today. I want to bring this subject a bit closer to home, not to forget, and it was mentioned briefly earlier, that human trafficking and slavery is actually endemic in the Royal Borough, in high-class brothels, some moments from the Town Hall, in Kensington High Street, Sloane Avenue, where the Chelsea Cloisters, the 10 floors of you know what, was discovered and the perpetrators sent to jail, and around Knightsbridge in various mansion blocks. They don't only enslave women, but they're at the top of a pyramid of organised crime, particularly Class A drug dealing and violence or threats of violence. And right at the bottom of this pyramid are the children, the county lines that who are being sucked into this horrible web of crime. You know, I'm sure they start off thinking it's a bit of fun, but actually they are at the they very soon get entrapped in this, and I'm talking about local children, not those necessarily brought in from abroad. And then they get completely sucked in, and they are completely stuck in this pyramid of crime. I've spoken to numerous borough commanders about this over the years, and I'm sorry to say that they don't have the facility, they don't have the capacity to investigate them. And unless there are shootings and blood on the street, one of them actually told me this, unless there's blood on the street, they don't have the capacity to get into this, and unless it becomes too obvious. So if they're careful and they're well managed, they're just left there. I've met some of the victims, and you wouldn't necessarily expect, I did know this, but you wouldn't necessarily expect women who look beautiful, respectable and fantastically turned out to be involved in that disgraceful business. But they are terrified. They are terrified. And the second they try to escape, they're sleeping in car parks. And I met one who was literally on the run and sleeping rough because she was too afraid to appear. So I just wanted to make the point, Mr. Mayor, we have it in the heart of our neighbourhoods. It's not elsewhere, and it affects people at all levels. This is yet again something we have to root out in our borough to make it the nice, wonderful place to live that we all want. And it's certainly not for women who've been trafficked and forced into sex slavery on our doorstep. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dent-Coad. Councillor Siren, do you wish to sum up from the leadership team? Councillor Atkinson, do you wish to speak? Councillor, I'm concerned we have quite a couple of other motions, so I don't wish to stop you, but can you keep time?
I will be quick, Mr. Mayor. I wish to speak up in support of what Councillor Dent-Coad has said. I mean, this is a very practical business in our borough, and if the borough is serious about doing something about it, there's an organisation called Calais, which is based in the borough, who have done sterling work over many years to help liberate the domestic servants who have been brought over to this country and then end up being sexually exploited. And I think rather than us being pious about this, we should actually, as a borough, be prepared to financially support an organisation which, as I say, has been active in this borough for more than 20 years. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Councillor Siren, do you wish to speak on this from the leadership team?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, really, I really welcome the debate tonight and find the whole issue of modern slavery shocking. And I think the numbers that Councillor Indris quoted are really just really shocking. So I think we need to continue to talk about this, do whatever we can to challenge it, to challenge our police partners and all our partners to root this out. and make it a thing of the past, which I think it rightly needs to be. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Idris, do you wish to sum up?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I'll leave it at that so we can allow other motions to be debated. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I now put the motion to the vote. Councillor Kamali, are the Conservative group for or against the motion?
We are for the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Lowry, are the Labour group for or against the motion?
The Labour group are for the motion.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wade?
For the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Palmer?
For the motion.
Thank you very much. Are there any other abstentions or votes not along party lines? Thank you very much. I declare that motion carried. Thank you. We now move on to the motion on Black Lives Matters. Members will see that an amendment has been submitted. I ask Councillor Thaxter formally to move the motion standing in her name and Councillor Dent Code to formally second. Councillor Thaxter.
I beg to move the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Dent Code.
I beg to second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thaxter to speak up to 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As a child growing up in Notting Hill, I was very privileged to have been brought up into a family that I wasn't taught racism or prejudice. I was taught that everyone is equal, and my parents taught me to respect each and every person and treat people fairly. The killing of George Floyd brought to the forefront burning issues that Black lives have suffered for many years, hundreds of years, from upright slavery to subtle discrimination and unconscious bias, even in modern day society that we proclaim to be egalitarian. Our society has never been equal for the Black-skinned person. In the workplace, the discrimination against Black men have been so mastercraft into human resources and employment processes where, for example, when a Black person that's more double or qualified applies for a job, they don't get hired. Excuses, for example, oh, we are not sure you will fit into the culture. You did very well, and we felt you were great. Your CV was impressive, but on this occasion, we found a candidate which is much better than you. We do not feel this role is right for you. We know you are well experienced and you can find another role easily. The council ethnicity report shows that it's only 5% of top earners are of the BAME background. Money has been taken in our name with clearly no evidence of it reaching the African Caribbean population. Sometimes I wonder, why are we always used to accumulate wealth for others? It seems as if the money that is meant for people are being used to pay staff, creating jobs where it's not necessary. We need money for our own. We need money for our community, and not funding large, well-funding umbrella groups that have got no form of cultural experience to deal with our community. No cultural experience in regards to Black people. Bearing in mind, no culture. Bearing in mind, our cultures consist of more than carnival and music. We don't even have a center to call our own. After all, our contribution. We need well-paid jobs, proper training, proper education, better housing, better opportunities. We don't need to be stereotyped. Where is the diversity in the council? I would like to see the declaration of interest for all the decision makers. All decision makers are from Chelsea. Nothing about us without us. Serious question needs to be asked for employers. Having tick boxes for equality have failed to ensure equality for Black people gaining employment, support and empowerment. We need empowerment. We don't need engagement. We've clearly showed that engagement does not work. We need empowerment. The council needs to carry out audits of HR systems to actively remove and eliminate conscious and unconscious bias. CVs from candidates should carry significant weight in the hiring decisions rather than how they look or their accent during a face-to-face interview. And finally, the council needs to ensure that all employers have quotas for Black people if we are seriously and are serious about claiming that Black Lives Matters. So therefore, I'm asking for an independent investigation to be carried out for all the wider powers to look into any discrimination practices within RBKC, including in the area of recruitment, inclusion, and social justice. Councillor Siren, I insist that I am on that council-wide investigation. And let me just mention that on top of all the contributions that we've done in this society, we have contributed £1 billion a year for the economy from Carnival, with no recognition, no help. All the money goes into paying staff, trickling down, and it's not reaching the people. It's about time there's someone to look into these processes, monitor and evaluate, and make sure, take away jobs where it's not needed, and make different jobs description for people who can make an impact, empower local residents, because they are in need and they deserve it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Baxter. Councillor Dent-Code, do you wish to speak in seconding the motion?
Yes, I do. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Also, I support Councillor Baxter absolutely, who has had personal experience of racism in her daily life, in her work, and I'm sorry to say here in the council building. If there's no acknowledgement from the council of the need for change, there can be no progress. I do smell complacency in some of the responses that I've heard earlier and over the years. And yet not long ago, and you'll know who I'm talking about, a black woman councillor was given a dress from a charity shop and ordered by another councillor to wear it to meetings, and then was told to fix her hair. So she had to conform to some perfect woman councillor look. And on another occasion, a diverse group of objectors at a planning meeting who were polite and well behaved, despite coming from North Kensington, were subjected to a bag and body search, treated like potential terrorists. Not long after, a group of very angry white objectors living next to Harrods were not searched on their way into the planning meeting. And when they started shouting and called the chair a liar, they were just politely asked to stop, and they weren't treated like terrorists. We all witnessed recently at a full council meeting, a physical meeting, a BAME Grenfell bereaved family member trying to speak from the public gallery, and he was told by the mayor at the time to be quiet. The very next meeting, a white woman called out from the public gallery and was allowed to speak. This looks bad. I have countless other examples, and some of these were aired last June by your former MP in the House of Commons. This put in motion a classic RBKC, pardon my language, butt-covering exercise in the form of a so-called investigation that resulted in this report, not quite 3 pages of comments and some supposed recommendations. Mr. Mayor, this report criticises me for not reporting comments that were made in a full council meeting. By imputation, it criticises council staff for not reporting instances of racism they personally have experienced. It then completely exonerates those who made some very distasteful comments I'd quoted due to their context. So it's no surprise to me that no one claims, promptly and in writing, as I was told, about racist incidents on the council. They know their complaint will be minimised, their credibility will be questioned and undermined, their reality will be denied, and their personal experience replaced by alternative facts and euphemisms. I know 4 former council staff members who left due to racism. None of them complained, and I understand why. This investigation cost £7,000 plus officer time, probably 9. That's £3,000 per page. Recommendations in the report are to raise awareness with cultural awareness training, along with monitoring equalities, and that will make 0 difference. Platitudes, jargon, and pastel-coloured bar charts will make 0 difference. Monitoring progress in due course will make 0 difference. I don't criticise officers here. It's for the councillors to show leadership, and there is really none within this council. In a borough where white British-born residents are in a minority, it is sadly pathetic that it took a public shaming from your former MP to compel you to employ 5 out of 33, 5 BAME directors, as the report states, as some kind of victory. It isn't progress. It isn't even a catch-up. In all humility, if I upset my friends or neighbours by using insensitive language or treating them disrespectfully or treating them like charity cases or lesser beings, I want to know. I don't want to do that again. After the racist murder of George Floyd, individuals and organisations across the country and across the world have reflected on their bias and discrimination, made public commitments and are changing their practice fundamentally. In contrast, our council's complacency to date is shocking. Soon, representatives from the council could be in Bishopsbridge Road defending their actions at the Granville Public Inquiry, which some would like to investigate alleged racist attitudes towards social tenants, and I support their demand. Mr. Mayor, the world is burning with injustice, and our response is to scrub off unwelcome graffiti and continue diversity training, which really hasn't worked. This is not the positive and definitive moment of change that so many are crying out for now. The majority party amendment to Councillor Thaxter's motion renders it weak and meaningless, removes the word racism altogether, and commits to an internal report, and I can't support that. Mr. Mayor, the Latin inscription behind your head reads, "How good it is to dwell in unity." Words are cheap. I ask the Council to show leadership and support this motion as proposed. The Council will be judged by its action, not words carved in stone. Thank you.
Hear, hear.
Thank you very much. I now call upon the amendment. Councillor Siren to formally move the amendment and Councillor Carley to formally second.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I beg to move.
Thank you.
I beg to second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Kamali, up to Councillor Siren, up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, colleagues. This amended motion highlights many of the reasons why I wanted to lead the community's portfolio, to ensure the voices of all our people, regardless of their background, beliefs or characteristics, shape the services they receive. This is the only way that we can be an inclusive, positive force for change in the lives of individuals, families, and communities that we need to be. This goes beyond compliance and statutory duties, and it's about the Council ensuring that we and our partners support all our individual and families to reach their potential, no matter what their start in life or current circumstance. And I will speak about practical steps this Council will take. This motion also speaks of the injustice, brutality and discrimination that Black, Asian and other minority ethnic communities have encountered, both historically and now. The Windrush scandal and the appalling killing of George Floyd and the protests that rightly followed are stark reminders of this wider societal ill. This Council rightly condemns this in the strongest possible way. And yet, despite the historic barriers facing them, Mr. Mayor, the contributions made by our Black, Asian and other minority ethnic community members, particularly the Windrush generation, have made Kensington and Chelsea one of the best places to live, work and study in the country. Our borough is vibrant, diverse and dynamic because of them. Drawing on my own experiences as a resident, drawing on my own experiences as a lead member for communities, I've been incredibly blessed to meet, work and learn from residents, staff and community leaders from all cultures and backgrounds. And I learn more and more every day. Yes, this includes learning about and valuing our differences, but also, and most importantly, understanding and building on the things that unite us. This Council absolutely recognises the need to remove any barriers to our services or employment that hold any of our communities back. Every single one of us must have an equal chance to flourish in our society, and that means we must do everything we can to root out racial injustice and racism itself, including unconscious and unintended bias. COVID alone has shone a bright light on the appalling, disproportionate outcomes faced by Black, Asian and other ethnic minority groups. It has forced all public services to explore who gets access to their services and what their outcomes are. And it's also provoked public services to examine how they recruit and how they've progressed them into senior positions. Kensington and Chelsea Council will, of course, be part of this change. And this takes me to the heart of what I wanted to say tonight. The amendment calls on the Council to report back on what steps it will put in place to ensure that systemic discrimination in our services is stamped out. We are enhancing our corporate equality, diversity and inclusion strategy. And our new strategy will be designed to focus the Council on improving our collection and use of equality data to identify and mitigate disparities related to accessing our services and the outcomes they produce. Having this specialist data and analysis capability will enable us to identify patterns of exclusion and inequitable outcomes, ensuring that we can better explore their causes and decide on appropriate interventions. This work will be driven at an operational level by the Chief Executive and will report directly to me and the leadership team, and I will report back to this Council on this enhanced strategy. We've already started engagement with community groups that represent our fellow residents from Black, Asian and other ethnic minority communities, and we will continue to work with these partners in public health to understand the issues and work to address them. The need to work together with our partners and support each other has never been greater. This amendment also calls on us to report into staffing arrangements and practices within the Council to examine whether there are instances of discrimination on grounds of race and whether improved workforce processes of recruitment, inclusivity and social justice at work can be implemented swiftly. And I listened carefully to Councillor Thaxter's concern about employment and leadership. We are serious about this, and I welcome the opportunity to work with her on this. This Council absolutely condemns injustice and brutality against our Black, Asian and other ethnic minority communities, and I consider it my biggest responsibility with the Chief Executive to address this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kamalo, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Very briefly, I would like to speak and share with you just a brief story of how I came to sit here with a name that I have. Coming from Turkey, a country which is both in Asia and in Europe, and being a Turk, a minority ethnic group here in London, I feel I am at least 3 out of the 4 letters of the acronym listed within this motion. And forgive me for the rather personal nature of this response, but as a multi-ethnic family, I thought tonight would be a good opportunity to give just one story of the countless thousands of our residents living within RBKC. And I'll start by saying, my father moved to the United Kingdom in the late 1950s to study engineering. He moved to Birmingham, Mr. Mayor, which was already known to be very multicultural, and yet he was still put into separate accommodation among the other foreign students. Birmingham had already seen large-scale immigration from the Windrush generation, other Caribbean nations and Southeast Asia, and it had certainly instilled a love for curried dishes within my father. As a so-called white Turk, having been born in Greece, to a Turkish mother who only spoke French, with a father living in Morocco, my father found a home in the United Kingdom in Britain and later moved to RBKC, where he has remained ever since, albeit there was a brief, long-forgotten time of him living in Westminster. Racism and discrimination, he will tell you, has changed a lot over time, and especially since his first arrival. Common slurs and comments from his student days have given way to more awareness and societal change. But we know we have not reached the end of this journey. The recent demonstrations are testament to the path we are on, but likewise, his decision to remain in the United Kingdom is a further testament to the attachment my father has to this country and to the journey it is on. He himself is guilty of being a definitive example of the terrible phrase, being of another time, much like I too will be when I hopefully reach the same 82 years of age. Terminology used to describe him and other Turks and those of Middle Eastern heritage has slowly faded from the English lexicon, and he too has adapted to the ever-changing world. Having kept his foothold in the UK, but with family back in Turkey, he decided to send my children to England to study when they were only 11 and 12 years old. They arrived not speaking a word of English and found the different way of living immensely challenging. They both suffered extremely from racial discrimination in the early 80s. No doubt they would have been even more aware of it had they actually learnt English sooner. One brother still remains in his 50s, torn about not being allowed into the rugby team. To him, they told him it was an English sport and not for him. A trivial issue, one could argue, but to a 13-year-old, it symbolized that he would have to fight harder, work for longer, struggle further to even get on the same playing field of his white English friends. He did actually later go on to represent Turkey internationally in multiple sports, and no doubt would have greatly improved his school's first 15. The same brother too has remained in the UK and his son, I'm happy to say, is now in the rugby team, whilst having an equally foreign-sounding name. I can assure you how much, upon hearing my name, it generally elicits additional questioning from the listener. My nephew Zia will be having similar conversations with his peers about the heritage of his name and where he is from. This is a question usually not meant with offence, but one which does make oneself do a double take. I too had similar experiences at school, and to this day a number of my teachers can still not correctly pronounce my Turkish name. I am Jem, Mr. Mayor. I'm from RBKC. The correct spelling and pronunciation of my name is between me, my parents, and occasionally Apple's autocorrect feature. Would my life at school have been easier if I was called James, John, or Edward? Possibly, but the school and my community would have been worse off losing a small piece of multiculturalism. I am glad to pay my part and be a small additional drop in the pool of our cultural mix here in Kensington and Chelsea, adding my unique heritage to the pot. I welcome this amendment, Mr. Mayor, and I'm pleased that this council will make sure that even something as minor as a double take over somebody's name be something of the past. We are a diverse borough, a diverse council chamber, and part of a diverse city. Let's keep it that way, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now invite other members to speak up to 5 minutes. Councillor Durian, do you wish to speak?
I do, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Mr. Mayor, before I say anything else, I think it's important to note that discussing the seriousness of racism and its effects on those who experience them doesn't mean that we are dismissing or belittling other kinds of discrimination and prejudice, which is faced by people from different backgrounds and walks of life. It's just that the spectre of racism has particularly vile effects, and it's important we realise that. Mr. Mayor, it also doesn't help that the word racist itself, ironically, has a stereotype of its own. We tend to conjure up the image of an angry white man ranting at foreigners. The day is more subtle. Some things may even seem trivial. The assumption you are not drinking at the pub because of your culture or religion rather than a personal choice. The question about where you're from only moments after you've met someone, even though you were born and grew up in the UK. Somebody always mistaking you for another person of the office or classroom and not bothering to tell the difference. These may sound banal or tiresome, but they take on a whole new seriousness when the person making these judgments is in a position of authority, and indeed may be from a minority background themselves. The employer who assumes the worst when a candidate struggles to explain a gap in their CV, the landlord who assumes a family won't have a problem with poor quality accommodation, the teacher who spends a bit less effort on a child, believing they will be unlikely to do well anyway. The even more serious examples, I think we all already know. So we can all be guilty of unconscious bias, using the stereotypes of society to make snap judgments about people based on what they look like. You do not have to be a member of a white supremacist group in order to be a racist. But does all this imply that every inequality we see is the direct result of racist attitudes and practices today? The coronavirus has swept through populations around the world. It does not see race. But in Britain, it has disproportionately affected Black, Asian, and other non-white minorities. The virus is not racist, but it could be the case that levels of deprivation are higher, that a higher proportion of people in these populations are in front-facing roles, and so could not benefit from the lockdown. They could not work from home. Many are in smaller, overcrowded accommodation, which may increase the risk of infection. Are these themselves the combined result of racist decisions in the past? We don't know for sure in every case, and I believe we must be careful not to jump to the conclusion that every disparity is the result of discrimination. To truly be able to tackle these inequalities, we must be able to look without fear or favour at the issues that hold back communities and stop individuals reaching their aspirations. And over the last few decades, enormous strides have been made in Britain to tackle racism and discrimination in all its forms. Social attitudes are consistently shifting beyond tolerance towards acceptance. Overt racism is no longer socially acceptable. Genuine racial hatred on the extreme fringes. Opportunities continue to open up. Lingering stereotypes are being overcome. And compared to many, many other parts of the world, this country, this capital city, is a good place to live for people, regardless of their skin color. So while we continue to identify and tackle the inequalities which are the result of racism past, let us all do our best to root out racism present and make sure we raise the next generation so the ghost of racism future is exorcised for good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ali, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, please. I hope you can hear me.
I can.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. May I take this opportunity to thank Councillor Portia Thaxter and, of course, Councillor Emerson Court for moving and seconding this timely motion. Mr. Mayor, I do support the Black Lives Matter motion. As it says on the motion, for a long time, the BAME community, especially the Windrush community, Mr. Mayor, have been suffering injustices and racism throughout the time they have been in this country, and especially when they came to support Britain to rebuild after the war. Mr. Mayor, this council should not only condemn all the injustices and the brutality against the BAME communities and the discrimination at all levels, but also provide an equal opportunities for all our communities of all levels, from housing to employment, to give an equal opportunity to everyone in our borough. Mr. Mayor, as we debate this motion this evening, this timely motion, Black Lives Matter, I would like to mention that I'm the only black man councillor in RBKC. Although I won't say I feel lonely, although I have a cross-party support, of course, and all other colleagues feel the same, that I am privileged to be representing my ward in Delgado. I represent all the communities in Delgado, both black, white, and mixed race. However, I think it's about time our council and all parties recognize that we want to support the black men specifically who have been going through a tough time from the days of slavery, and at the moment they are the most population at the prison cells. I think it's about time specifically to support black men who have been suffering for a long time. Mr. Mayor, I've noticed and I'm aware of the new steps taken by the lead member for communities, Councillor Ann Saran, and I hope the upcoming inclusion policies and strategy that she and her team are working on, we will scrutinize to the core, and as well I hope this will be acceptable strategy to all our members and all our residents in RBKC, and give everyone an equal opportunity. Mr. Mayor, this is what needs to be done. One, to support the black children in education and not to allow schools in RBKC to exclude easily black children. Simply, we know, Mr. Mayor, education is a pathway to prosperity, and if one does not have adequate education, may not get an opportunity to get a good job, and if one does not get a good job, may not have a roof over their head, or at least will suffer to have a good housing. So economically and housing is interconnected, Mr. Mayor. Second point, the council to support black-owned businesses in the borough, and the relevant lead members to report back to the council and to let us know how many black-owned businesses have been supported before and after COVID-19, and also how many black-owned businesses has been established in the borough with the support of Kensington and Chelsea. And third, Mr. Mayor, the black and Asian communities really need the support of mainly housing and overcrowding. And we know through COVID-19 the problem of overcrowding and how COVID-19 has specifically hit black and Asian minorities. Mr. Mayor, I welcome the leaders. The leader of the council has accepted my proposal of setting up a cross-party BAME councillors as a working group to know more about the issues affecting the BAME and Asian communities in the borough. However, I would like the leader of the council to give us a time and date to start this process. One, is good to accept it, but also it's also fantastic to put timeline to it so that we can get to work, Mr. Mayor. Finally, Mr. Mayor, I would like to say that the leader of the council has also just said moments ago that her team is international. Almost 50% of them were born outside RBKC or outside the country. But that's missing the point, Mr. Mayor. one can born in Africa, but can still be a white and have the opportunities that the black people in the borough and in the country may not get. However, I would also like to notice and welcome one of her leadership team, is a Muslim with a Turkish heritage, Councillor Jim Kamali. I hope I pronounced your name correctly, Jim Kamali. But as it says, and as we all know, all her leadership team are from a white ethnicity, and I think it's about time for our council leaders to think about it and represent all our communities, and perhaps when time comes to get other BAME and black Asian and black members within her party to give opportunities to become the front runners, or at least front bench, Mr. Mayor. I will rest my case on that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wade, do you wish to speak?
Yes, very quickly. It's actually about the wording of some of the changes, that the amendments. I think that what is very clear is that we do need an independent review of it. I think the 3-page report that was generated for Councillor Dent Code was perhaps inadequate. I think if we're going to take this seriously, we do need to have an independent inquiry, because in effect we're dealing with inequalities, so therefore we do need a high benchmark. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Aretti, do you wish to speak?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Aretti.
I think I'm on the list, am I, Mr. Mayor?
You are. I'll call you in a moment. I'm just
okay.
Councillor Aretti. Councillor Idris, do you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a fitting and timely topic. Addressing injustice and prejudice is basic human decency. While we might not all agree on the methods, the message is clear: Black lives matter. However, when it comes to this motion, beyond the first 2 sentences, it completely loses sight of the issue and becomes a score settling exercise. And that, Mr. Mayor, is unfortunate, because it betrays the essence of this motion. In times like this, sensible people put aside their ideological differences and work together to serve the issue. They use their platforms and voices collectively to bring attention to it. What they don't do is grandstand and self-satisfy, especially when the whole world is watching and history is writing a new chapter. Mr. Mayor, this motion started on the right track, then became accusatory, then informing, inflammatory rather than calming, and inciting instead of unifying. I have been a councillor now for 2 years and a bit. In that time, my experience with officers, council workers, and councillors has been nothing but collegiate and collaborative. It actually played a huge part in me enjoying being a councillor so much. I learned a great deal about the council and the way things work, mostly from officers. And never once did I feel ignored, singled out, or disrespected by any of them. That is why I find the tone of this motion a little bizarre and not at all in keeping with its spirit. And because of that, Mr. Mayor, I will be supporting the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mason.
As Mr. Mayor, I also congratulate Councillor Thaxter and Dent Code for the putting the motion forward, and I support the motion as tabled, and also the words of Councillor Kassim, because it is more important that some of those BAME communities are standing in this chamber speaking to us, and that includes Councillor Idris. And I do find it strange that she talked about, Councillor Idris talked about score settling, it being a score settling exercise and grandstanding out of the blue, because I was always led to believe that you have to listen to the people who either think that they detect any type of discrimination or racism. You don't tell them what their experience is. Oh, that's what we did for many decades in the UK, as they did in the US, and we respect what they are telling us and saying, just as we are asked also to respect, and Councillor Edith expects that same respect. Councillor San said that every single one of us must have an equal chance in life, and I'm sure she believes that. But of course, as Councillor Thaxter and others have said, this is not reality. The gap between rich and poor is large. Councillor Durian talked about the code of BAME disproportionality affecting them for all the reasons he mentioned: poor housing and low jobs, and they have to be they're the frontline workers who are likely to get it. The analysis is all there, and a lot of it is obviously race related. And if the Westway Trust can hire an outside organisation to look at it, and is not afraid to do that, because what they are dealing with happened over past decades, then I don't see why we can't do this here. Are we really going to be expecting our officers to judge between different groups? We should not be doing that. It's a bit like, as we used to say in the old days, having the police investigating the police. We wouldn't expect that. Now, I've been here long enough in North Kensington to have seen real racism, and some of the children and grandchildren of the parents and people who experienced that are still living here and elsewhere now. So when we talk about racism future and racism past, we still have racism now. We just debated the modern slavery motion, and a lot of the people who are involved in that in hundreds of foreign countries, they are the same minorities, or we would say they were minorities, who are the poor people who are living on the streets, who have nothing, who are being discriminated against and discriminated in because of their race. So I don't see why we should be afraid of having an independent look at what we are doing. And it seems to me that I imagine that somebody looked at the motion, and when they saw the word racism, they felt it was a distasteful thing. Oh, we couldn't possibly have that in the motion. It's quite distasteful. And we shouldn't be afraid of the word racism, because this council acted racistly in the past, as many others did, and we can go through the examples of that. North Kensington is steeped from the 1958 race riots, Kelso Cochrane death, the Mangrove trials, onwards, the white-only clubs. We can go on. The carnival attacks by the government, supported by this council in the past. We can go on. So that is racism past. And if we really want an account of where we are, we shouldn't be doing it ourselves, because not only is it not good practice, but nobody's going to believe the outcome. Why would they? Because this, as somebody said previously, I forget which councillor said it, this council is being accused by elements of the Grenfell community that part of the reason that so many people of BAME nationalities died in the tower is because they were in this category, and that therefore we were operating a racist housing policy. Certainly the policies of the government mitigated towards those people being crammed into those towers, and towers like it all over the country. So we're still living with racism now. So I support the motion as it stands now, simply because I think if you go ahead now, not only will this wash into everyone's going to forget and put it on a shelf, but nobody's going to have the people out there are not going to feel credibility about anything any results that we bring forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mills, do you wish to speak?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Thank you.
Good evening. And may I too take a knee, as the proverbial saying goes, to Councillor Thaxter, albeit this evening it's a virtual knee. And that's to thank you for bringing to the heart of RBKC a discussion on a reckoning, frankly, long due in the UK, 500 years in respect of Caribbean people. The unresolved and often unaccepted idea that there is racism, prejudice, injustice that has led and continues to lead to inequalities is as prevalent today as ever it was. It is an uncomfortable aspect of people's perceptions. They don't like it. Stereotyping on the basis of color and difference, and even the very acronym BAME. What is that about? That is about establishing color, difference, and ethnicity in order to treat you differently. Those acronyms should never be used and they should never be invented. And so all of these particular ways of teaching people come from the brutality of a 500-year-old set of codes and practices known as slavery. And we need to know how those attitudes have weaved their way into making modern day policy. So, Mr. Mayor, as Councillor Mason has said, this authority stands under interrogation as to whether its historic practices in respect of policy, in respect of housing, in respect of education, actually have at their core a possible racist set of motives, and we must look into that. So Professor Olusoga has asked us, and we ask you, Mr. Mayor, to look into what it is about the lens of slave history that causes fear, causes discomfort, causes us to push things under the carpet that are so manifestly apparent to so many residents in Kensington and Chelsea and to those of Caribbean descent. Is it the British Barbados Slave Code of 1661 that put into statute the right of the British landowner to whip any Negro or slave who shall offer any violence to any Christian? Or is it the further amendments littered through parliamentarian histories that gave rights to the white man to chastise, to whip, to brand, to lacerate, to cripple, to set on fire, Mr. Mayor, to murder and to maim without any legal repercussions any of his properties who were black who disobeyed him? Was it the white woman, his wife, or his overseer under the droit de seigneur who was able to rape male or female slaves? Pedophilia rampant. Is it when we look at the lens of history that we see the countless sons and daughters sired by white men who cast their own blood to the dung heap of history simply because it was a mistake, it was miscegenation, a mésalliance, as the French like to call it, mixed race bastards not helped up the pool of privilege that was so open to their white brothers, half-brothers and sisters? Or maybe, Mr. Mayor, we fear to look at the given of whiteness, what Black Lives Matter call white privilege, what in the old days we called noblesse oblige, the idea that somehow because you were white or you are white, you are somehow better, you are somehow more entitled. Maybe RBKC needs to look down its own lens of history, come up to the modern day, to face the fact that cultural prejudice led to the Notting Hill race riot. It needs to look into the murder of Kelso Cochrane, whose, like Stephen Lawrence, his murderers have never been apprehended. Mr. Mayor, one of the most unfortunate memories of my mayoralty was putting up the plaque to Kelso Cochrane and to seeing the tears in the eyes of his family as they said that the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea had never once honoured their son or sought to get justice for his murder. Maybe it is the fear, Mr. Mayor, of looking into the black box that is our hearts and souls, to understand that actually there is racism, and that when people of colour and difference tell you that there is, we ignore it. Many people ignore it. Policymakers ignore it.
30 seconds, Councillor Mill.
Thank you. And so my ending to you, Mr. Mayor, is to ask, how much longer do people have to go on being a colour, being a race, being a faith? Why can't we just be people and just leave it at that and rip out that 500-year-old set of racist attitudes prevalent today as ever they were? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Councillor Schmettling, would you like to speak?
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Well, if Councillor Kemali thinks he's got problems with people pronouncing his name, how about yours truly? Of course, Black Lives Matter. This is a good opportunity to bring before the Council a motion to affirm this. And it is right to call upon the Council, which includes us councillors, to examine its and our practices to ensure there is no discrimination on grounds of race or ethnicity. Absolutely, Black Lives Matter. As I said in speaking to the earlier motion, we are all made in the image of God, and there is no basis for discrimination or mistreatment on grounds of the colour of the skin. In our enthusiasm to support the cause wherever we can, we may rush into supporting the formal hashtag Black Lives Matter movement, but I would urge caution. The movements, both in the United States and United Kingdom, are exhibiting anti-Semitic tendencies and party political directions, as well as taking positions on societal arrangements which seem to have no bearing on the substantive issue. The motion, with the proposed amendment, calls for sensible and executable measures to deal with any issues in the Council. And because Black Lives Matter, I urge everyone to vote for the motion as amended. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell, do you wish to speak, please?
Yes, just on really 2 points of information. Just what Councillor Dent Code was saying about the independent commission which investigated her allegations of racism. And I'm quoting from the report, having investigated, found that neither content nor intention was racist. So let's put that one to bed. Secondly, I'd just like to comment on the quality of the discussion tonight, which I think has been really high with very, very good speeches. But I'd just like to pick up on what Councillor Ali said. He seemed to think that I had agreed to have a sort of BAME cross-party committee looking into things, and I'm just trying to find what I said at the overview and scrutiny committee. I said we will be doing huge amounts of surveys and listenings, and we will use our councillors to do that on a cross-party basis, i.e. all of our councillors on a cross-party basis are welcome at the amount of engagement and listening exercises which we're doing online and in person. And he should get in contact with Councillor Siren to make sure that, you know, he can go to all these things, but not just Councillor Ali. I would suggest that all councillors, whatever their background, and on both sides of the council, need to really engage in all this community engagement that we're doing so that they can better represent those who elected them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have had a lot of speakers on this now, and I wish to draw this to the summing up. So I'm going to ask Councillor Siren to respond and sum up her amendment. I'm then going to ask Councillor Thaxter to respond to the amendment. We will take a vote on the amendment, and then Councillor Thaxter to sum up on the motion as it stands then. So Councillor Siren, do you wish to sum up on the amendment, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really do thank all my colleagues, and in particular Councillor Thaxter, for raising these important issues of equality, discrimination and racism. It's a very important discussion, and it must be at the heart of the council, and we totally acknowledge the need for change. And Councillor Mason, we are not afraid of the word racism. In fact, it's in the first line of our amendment. We're united against it and against all discrimination. I want to also thank in particular all colleagues who've bravely given such personal reflections and stories. And I look forward to scrutiny by the chair of the Housing and Community Scrutiny Chair and Committee. And just to reiterate what Councillor Campbell has said, I'm keen to work with all colleagues on tackling these issues and how we address them. And Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to say that, you know, I'm passionate about tackling these issues. And once again, I commit to report back to this council on our progress with the strategy, the actions we're going to be taking, and the report on the council's practices. And thank you very much again for the discussion tonight.
Thank you. Councillor Thaxter, do you wish to respond to the amendments before we put the amendment to the vote?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I do. I would like to thank Councillor Siren and Councillor Adrian for understanding that there are work that needs to be done and that there's a particular issue that we need to tackle, which is racism and also discrimination. And I would also like to say that I'm looking forward to working with Councillor Siren on this matter, and together we'll be able to do something effectively and positively on the ground. I would also like to go back to Councillor Max. Max? Let me just, the lady that spoke. Her surname is Max, am I right?
Councillor Mills? Do you mean Councillor Mills?
No, it's not Councillor Mills.
Councillor Idris?
Idris, yeah. Is it Idris?
Councillor Wala Idris.
Yes, that said that I'm score selling. How dare her? Okay, I am African Caribbean. Yeah, I've overcome the Windrush and transatlantic slave trade. So clearly we're not in the same skin. We don't have the same culture. So when you're talking about score selling, you're the one that is score selling at the moment. It's not about trying to look pretty. Okay, it's about doing the right thing to humanity. That's all. I'm not having a go at no officer, no councillor. We just want to work together. So on that note, I suggest you go and learn things psychologically and genetically, then you can get back to me. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So I'm now going to put the amendment to the vote. Councillor Kamali, are the Conservative group for or against the amendment?
The Conservative group is for this amendment, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Lowry, are the Labour group for or against the amendment?
The Labour group are firmly against the amendment, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Wade, are you for or against the amendment, or are you abstaining?
I'm against the amendment.
Councillor Palmer, are you for or against the amendment or abstaining?
Having listened to Councillor Dent-Code's wonderful rendition, I am totally in support of the amendment.
Thank you. Are there any abstentions or votes not along party lines? I therefore declare the amendment carried. Councillor Thaxter, you now have an opportunity again now to sum up on the motion as amended if you wish to, before I put it to the vote. Councillor Thaxter, do you wish to sum up on the amendment, on the motion as amended, or are you happy for us to go straight to the vote?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I would just like to inform everyone that Black Lives Matters, and we are in a situation where we have been oppressed over the years, and it's about time that something has been done, because we are genuine, caring, humble people, and we can make a huge impact on society, as you've seen over centuries, over the years. And it's about time we get a fair chance in society, because our name's been used hundreds and hundreds of times to gain funds, and we're not receiving that sort of support. So I would ask for your support in the motion.
Thank you very much. I shall now put the motion as amended to the vote. Councillor Kamali, are the Conservative group for or against the motion as amended?
We are for the motion as amended.
Thank you. Councillor Lowry, are the Labour group for or against the motion as amended?
The Labour group is for the motion, and in doing so notes the disgrace of the word racism being removed from a motion about racism by the majority group.
It's in the second line, Sina.
Thank you. We've had that debate. we've had that debate, gentlemen. I'm now going to carry on with the voting. Councillor Wade, are you for or against the motion as amended or abstaining?
For.
Councillor Palmer, are you for or against the motion as amended or abstaining?
For.
Thank you. Are there any other abstentions or votes not along party lines? I therefore declare the motion as amended carried. We now have one final motion, and we've got 15 minutes, so I'm going to take the motion. Whips, if we go over by 10 minutes, say, is that acceptable to you, please?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Yes, I think it's good.
Thank you very much. I now call the motion on short-term lets and holiday lets. Members will see that an amendment has been submitted. So I now call upon Councillor Spalding formally to move the motion standing in his name and Councillor Hammond to formally second. Councillor Spalding.
I beg to move, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Hammond.
I beg to second, sir.
Councillor Spalding, up to 5 minutes to speak.
This is very brief and very straightforward, and I hope we have all party support. The Environment Select Committee Working Group on Short-Term Holiday Lettings reported in 2017 and made 9 recommendations, and all of these were adopted and endorsed by leadership. I have to thank Councillor Press, former Councillor Condon Simmons, Miss Hurd and Mr Traherne for all their hard work in producing the report. Recommendations 4 to 9 have largely been implemented under the leadership of Mr Priestley. However, this year, following the publication of the GLA Mayor's research note in February, we now have to renew our efforts to implement recommendations 1 to 3. One is to lobby the government for the introduction of primary legislation to compel short-term holiday hosts to be licensed. 2 is for the borough to adopt a self-financing compulsory registration and licensing scheme with enforceable standards. And 3 is for the borough to have a selective pilot scheme in 3 of the most affected wards. Karen Buck MP has been working closely with Nikki Aitken MP, who is the former leader of Westminster Council, on bringing that legislation forward.
Hello, sausage.
They are supported by our new Kensington MP, Felicity Buchan. Now, the market leader itself, Airbnb, is also introducing a licensing scheme of its own and is supporting national legislation. So, our joined-up enforcement and the new warden teams of part of CREST will be monitoring and enforcing anyway. The majority of Airbnb properties, 77%, are occupied quite legally for less than 90 nights a year. But of those breaching the planning use, half of the breaches are in the 5 inner London boroughs, involving 18,000 properties. In our borough, we have 88,000 housing units, and these lettings have grown from 1,500 5 years ago to 6,000 today. That's 7% of our housing stock, and it's the 4th highest in London. 2,500 of these are breaching their planning use, and they're not being used as full-time residential, but have in fact become full-time commercial lettings, and therefore a permanent loss to our housing stock. 20% of my own ward housing is a second home, nearly all owned offshore, and it's either let out as full-time holiday businesses or kept empty. Most of the Airbnb hosts are responsible, but a minority of about 15% are abusing the system, depleting our housing stock, creating antisocial behaviour and waste management problems. 280 hosts have more than 10 properties each. One superhost actually has 820 properties. 25% of the hosts regularly breach the 90 days rule, and they profit great whilst they cause us these social problems, yet they contribute nothing in council tax or in business rates. This council is requested to instruct the lead member for the environment to write to our MPs to lobby for a compulsory registration and licensing scheme. So I beg you, please support this motion, and I beg to move, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hammond, do you wish to speak?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and I'd like to thank Councillor Spalding for moving this motion and for speaking so movingly to it, and also for getting this very important issue onto the Council's radar 3 or 4 years ago. I'd also like to thank the London councils and the authors of the report that they produced in February for producing a very balanced assessment of this difficult subject. And I'd like to thank the lead member for environment for his engagement on this issue. And finally, I'd like to thank colleagues from the party opposite for their constructive amendment. We haven't heard their pitch for it yet, but I'm certainly personally happy with the words that they have suggested. The report from London councils is a pre-pandemic report. It was published in February, and our motion was written shortly afterwards, before lockdown. The problem has been slightly mitigated by lockdown, and we've got some anecdotal evidence of some of the short-term let flats going back onto the AST, the Assured Short-Hold Tenancy market. But the problem hasn't gone away altogether. And only this week we've had reports in my part of South Kensington from Stanhope Gardens and from Courtfield Gardens of continued problems from rogue Airbnb or other short-term letting platform tenants. And if nothing changes, as the economy recovers, all the conditions that led to the problems that that my friend Councillor Spalding so accurately reported will re-emerge, and we'll be back exactly where we started. There's a lot I could talk about on this issue, but I'll just latch in a little bit of detail on just one of them, and that's the opportunity costs of the lost dwellings that this represents. As Councillor Spalding mentioned, the officers' report to the Environment Select Committee this month assesses conservatively that they had 5,723 short lets in RBKC in May 2019, so nearly 6,000. And that was 2.5 times the figure from 4 years earlier. And it's very worrying that if they breach the 90-day short-term letting limit and they're not detected with that, after 5 years, short-term letting can become an established use. And those properties are permanently lost as dwellings. Now, having potentially lost 5,723 dwellings in the borough, that's 13 times larger than the latest new build target that we've been given. Now, of course, we should be building new properties, and I welcome the extra 97 homes that went through planning this week as stage one of the 600 new homes, as we have a severe housing shortage. But I do find it very hard to take a target number seriously when we're losing such a large number of properties at the other end of the chain to short-term letting. Bluntly, we need to make short-term letting less attractive to landlords so that particularly the large landlords with multiple properties change their calculus, and they think it's better to either sell the properties or to let them on AST terms.
Yeah, I had to go on, so it's lucky I was here.
Thus creating, obviously getting some heckling there from the leader.
Sorry.
Carry on, Councillor Hammond.
I will, yes, because it's a very important point here. Because I think we need to change that calculus amongst the landlords so that they sell or let on AST terms, because that creates homes for residents. And the more homes that are available to either buy or to rent, the less will be the prices, and that's basic supply and demand. So this is the direction we should be moving in. This report from London councils and this motion are both steps in that direction, and I therefore commend it to the Chamber.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor, I now, sorry, call upon the amendment. Councillor Prest, I call upon you formally to move the amendment, please.
I'd like to move the amendment.
Mr. Mayor.
And Councillor Atkinson to second, please.
I'm pleased to second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Press, do you wish to speak to 5 minutes on your amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Many London residents have noticed that one benefit of the lockdown was hearing the dawn chorus again. But for me, the greatest benefit has been that since the 2 Airbnb short-term letting flats in my block were empty and remain empty, I've not been woken during the night with arrivals pulling heavy suitcases up the communal stairs, no more black bin bags full of unused food dumped at the front and opened by hungry foxes overnight, and no more loud all-night parties, and no more cleaning cigarette ends out of my patio as the ban on indoor smoking becomes smoking on the balcony with no ashtrays. So my one regret during the lockdown was that there were 2 flats in my block that could house local people but have been standing empty for 3 months. So I thank Councillor Spalding and Councillor Hammond for bringing this important GLA report to the Council's attention and reminding us of the imperative to take action on unregulated and badly managed short-term lets in the borough. And now is the time, although 2017 was also the time. And I'd like to briefly note and remember the detailed research and discussions that went into the working group that Councillor Spalding chaired back in 2017, one of the most thorough working groups I've worked on, and looking at how other boroughs had piloted a licensing scheme for all private rentals in a specific problem area and managed a near zero balance financial outcome. And the piloting of a licensing scheme in 3 of the worst affected neighbourhoods in our borough was, as Councillor Spalding reminded us, a recommendation to the leadership in the 2017 working group report. And so I feel it needs to be in this motion. Tonight's motion notes the difficulties of enforcing the 90-day limit, and we know very well that unscrupulous landlords are moving between platforms in order to rent out all year round. And the Labour group notes and supports the number of influential London-wide groupings that are now lobbying the government to take more action and give councils more power. And we think it important this motion notes specifically the London Mayor and the GLA's work on this issue. And we agree that the long-term solution has to be London-wide and government supported. But the key issue remains, and will always remain, enforcement. And it is registration and licensing schemes that expose the rogue landlord who will avoid registering and certainly paying for a license, let alone pay tax on his/her earnings, or probably have any concern for wear and tear in communal areas, or that his short-term letting business invalidates the building insurance, or that proper fire safety measures are not in place in his property. Incredibly important considerations for us all in this council. So while we wait for a London-wide registration scheme and the council lobby and we get government support, a limited licensing scheme must be piloted if we really care about housing in our borough and the safety and comfort of our residents. A licensing scheme is self-funding as the annual payment from legitimate landlords pay for the extra enforcement officers to locate and prosecute the rogue landlords who are not only inconveniencing our residents with fly tipping and noise and nuisance, but putting them in danger, given the lack of any fire safety inspections required on their property. This council is now on the list of local authorities who could face possible bankruptcies. Owners of properties in Kensington who let them out as short-term or holiday lets all year round should be paying taxes as a commercial business, paying to cover increased waste management, should be applying the same safety checks and measures as hotels, and should be paying for regular inspections of their properties to ensure they're safe to rent out. Currently, licensing is the only route and should be piloted as soon as possible and provide an added income stream for the council. Having heard Councillor Spalding's and Councillor Hammond's figures and speeches tonight, I'm sure the amendment will have the support of ward councillors Botfield, Earls Court and Pembridge as the 3 worst affected neighbourhoods in the borough. And I do urge the leadership and all of us in this chamber to vote for the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Atkinson, do you wish to speak for 5 minutes?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, very briefly. I wish to speak briefly only because the 3 previous speakers have made the main points. This problem arises only in a few areas of the country, so getting national attention to it is difficult. So I would agree that we need to work with other London boroughs and with the Mayor of London, and any resolution we make must have teeth. Therefore, a licensing arrangement as being pioneered by other boroughs is necessary. I mean, I too suffer from one apartment where I live, where constantly my recycling is ruined because the people there don't know, don't care, and treat the place, which is a residential street, as a holiday venue. I applaud the mention made that this is a possible revenue stream from the borough. Nobody objects to people making a little money out of their own properties, but actually there are commercial aspects around this who are ruining residential areas and not paying taxes. So for these reasons, I hope that you will all support the amendment, because I think that is the quickest way of really having an impact on the lives of our residents. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kamali, do you wish to respond to the amendment, and then we'll take it forward to a vote?
Just very briefly, Mr. Mayor, I just want to thank all the speakers. This is a very important issue. I am aware that the motion has been waiting its turn for quite some time. So long, in fact, that I've actually saved the postage, because I'll now be sending my letter to a different MP, which I look forward to doing, and I'm sure she'll take this up and we can get on and sort this out for all of the members here. Thank you.
Councillor Press, do you wish to sum up on the amendment before we move to the vote?
No, I think we are all ready to move to the vote. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Spalding, I have to ask you if you wish to sum up before we move to the vote, but I think we might be ready to move to the vote.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will not be summing up, but I will be voting for the amendment.
Thank you very much. Well, let me now put the amendment to the vote. Councillor Kamali, are the Conservative group for or against the amendment?
I'm happy to say we are for the amendment.
Thank you very much. Councillor Lowry, are the Labour group for or against the amendment?
We are unsurprisingly for the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Wade, are you for or against the amendment, or abstaining?
For the amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Palmer, for, against, or abstaining?
I'm for the amendment.
Thank you. Are there any other abstentions or votes not along party lines? So I declare the amendment carried. I now put the motion as amended to the vote. Councillor Kamali, are the Conservative group for or against the motion as amended?
We are for the motion as amended.
Thank you. Councillor Lowry, for or against the motion as amended?
We are for the motion as amended.
Thank you. Councillor Wade, for, against?
For the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Palmer?
For.
Thank you. Are there any abstentions or votes not along party lines? Thank you. I declare the amended motion carried. Thank you very much for all the speakers on the motions this evening. I think we've had some excellent motions and some excellent speakers, so thank you. So I now move on to the final item on the agenda, which is appointments to committees. Item 14, appointments to committees and outside organisations. The appointments sheet has been circulated. I call upon Councillor Kamali to move the move the nominations standing in his name.
I wish to move the nominations standing in my name, Mr. Mayor.
Are the nominations agreed? Thank you. Are there any other nominations? I just wish to make a comment on the Audit and Transparency Committee, as we have some additional members for the Code of Conduct hearings only. Nominations by Councillor Kamali, for Councillor Kamali. I will now to talk about the Investment Committee. The Council is asked to note that Sir Michael Craig Cooper and Dr. Jonathan Reid have stepped down as co-opted members of the Investment Committee. The Council wishes to convey its thanks and appreciation to them for the long and dedicated service they have provided to the Council. Following advertisements to the Council on the Council website and on specialist websites, a panel comprising of Councillor Marshall and Councillor Will and Mr. Broadbent, an existing co-opted member, and Mr. Triggs, the Director of Treasury and Pensions, met on the 17th and 14th of June to interview for the 5 vacant co-opted positions on the Investment Committee. The Council is asked to confirm the following appointments as non-voting members of the Investment Committee: Richard Hubbard, Robert Davey, Henry Cook, Hugo Dias. These appointments will be made in line with the Council's policy on appointments agreed in April 2019. Are those appointments agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. That concludes the business of this evening's meeting of the Council. The next meeting of the Council is scheduled to be held on the 21st of October. I wish you all a pleasant summer. Good evening. Thank you.
Good evening and goodbye, Mr. Mayor.